Will the Committee on Budget please come to order? It is 9:04 a.m. on Tuesday, January 9, 2024. I would like to welcome our Committee Vice Chair Wire, Council Members Say, Toba, and we also have joining us Councilmember Tupola, Council Chair Waters as well. And Councilmember Kiaina is here present as well. Okay. And I will announce her presence when she does come back in. We don't have any members participating remotely, so I'll move forward. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. And I would also like to welcome our Council Vice Chair, Kiaina. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda through two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raise hand feature on Zoom to be called upon. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9, which will indicate your desire to speak. I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, then please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. And if you are also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, I will then proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will then be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, in accordance with HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and will not be able to reconvene until re-establish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please silence or turn off all cell phones. Before I move on, I just want to wish everyone a happy new year. It is the first committee of the year, so welcome everyone. We hope we have a great year and great and productive year. Moving forward, we have the first agenda item, which is Resolution 23-304, which authorizes the execution of an amended full funding grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration for federal transportation assistance authorized by the United States Code, Title 49 and Chapter 53, and other federal statutes administered by the FTA. Members, for your information, we do have a hand-carried CD1 for the resolution that all members should have on their desk, or if not, it should be given out. Council members, it is OCS 2024-0023 /1/8/2024 4:24 p.m., which adds revisions requested as you can see in the council communications on the agenda as well via letter from Hart, which is as follows. It's our Departmental Communications 10. So if you wish to see it on H&L Docs, it is Departmental Communications 10. So first off, the Amendment A amends the last whereas clause to substitute and for now therefore. B adds a new whereas clause where the last whereas clause to 1, recognize that the segment of the locally preferred alternative east of Civic Center Station to Ala Moana Center will no longer be funded by the FTA's New Starts program pursuant to the amended FFGA. And 2, state that the council's intent is that rail planning, design, and construction activities continue for that segment of the locally preferred alternative to the maximum extent allowed with available funding. C adds 2, be it further resolved before the last be it finally resolved clause to affirm that the minimum operable segment, MOS, of the rail project approved by Resolution 08-261 is the segment of the locally preferred alternative that may be planned, designed, developed, and constructed, regardless of the scope of the federal New Starts project that will be reflected in the amended FFGA and subject to other available funding. And 2, state that prior approvals by the council with respect to any transactions related to the segment of the rail project between the Civic Center Station and Ala Moana Center that are currently valid and in effect are hereby reaffirmed and remain in effect. And D, makes miscellaneous technical and non-substantive amendments. With that, we will first take up information from HART. With us today, we have Rick Keene, Deputy Director of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation. Good morning, Happy New Year.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Waters, Chair Cordero, council members. Happy New Year. I'm Rick Keene. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at HART, and we're here today to seek approval of the amended full funding grant agreement. As a bit of history, the original full funding grant agreement was signed between the city and the Federal Transit Administration back in 2012, and that provided $1.55 billion in funding for the rail project. Out of that $1.55 billion, we have received $806 million, $744 million remains, and we haven't received any funding under that grant agreement since 2017. The recovery plan that we submitted to this body and to our board in 2022, it was approved, was submitted to the FTA in June of 22 and accepted by the FTA in September. It included an amended scope. The scope of the recovery plan does not take the project to Ala Moana, but rather it stops at the Civic Center Station in Kaka'ako. The full funding grant agreement, the original full funding grant agreement included the scope all the way to Ala Moana. So when that recovery plan was approved, that necessitated a change in the scope in the full funding grant agreement. We've been working collaboratively with the FTA for the better part of actually over a year now, trying to get this document finalized. There were a lot of steps that were required that no one anticipated. It's kind of an unusual situation for the FTA to amend a full funding grant agreement. There were several layers of review done at the state and at the federal level. But finally, right before Thanksgiving, we received the final document from the FTA. The HART board approved the document in a meeting on November 29th, and now we're bringing it to council, first to this committee, and if approved, we're requesting it go to the full council on January 24th. After that, the document will be ready to execute. The mayor and the administrator of the FTA in Washington will sign the document. Lori Kaikina, on behalf of HART, will sign as in an attest function, and CORE has a legal affirmation in the document, so CORE will also be signing off. But we're anticipating that, hopefully, by the end of January or the early part of February. At the time that the document gets executed, that will trigger the release of the first $125 million of the remaining $744 for the project. Now, in terms of the document that's in front of you today, there are only 3 primary updates from the 2012 document. First, the scope was adjusted, as I mentioned. That's the primary reason for amending the document. It is consistent with the recovery plan that was submitted in 2022. The financial schedules at the back of the document have been updated to be consistent with the recovery plan. And then there was one section added for milestones for which the remaining $744 million will be released. The first of which I already mentioned, and that's the execution of this document. But they added that schedule. Aside from that, the document is essentially the same as it was in 2012. I will say that when we received the document, both Hart and Core reviewed the document. There are several cleanup items in here. There are formatting issues around some of the tables that cause some of the lines to be off a little bit, page numbers, a few typos. We have submitted a list of all those items to the FTA. They control the document. We're hopeful, we're expecting that by the time we get to the end of January and get ready to execute the document, that we will have a cleaned up version of the document to sign. Nothing substantive was brought up. It was all just minor typo type things. So hopefully those all get cleaned up. With that, I'm available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Before I move to my committee members, I would like to have a few questions. So with the remaining funding by the FTA grant payments, what will be the timeline after the amended FFGA is approved that the payments will be dispersed?
Sure. We have been working with the FTA as well as with BFS. BFS needs to submit, we prepare, but it goes through a BFS, no, excuse me, let me back up, DTS. We've been working with DTS. They have the ability to input grant information into the Federal Transit Administration system. We have been working with the FTA and DTS to make sure that we have all the documentation ready to go. Once this gets executed, the information will be input. We are hoping it's hard to predict the exact timing. We're expecting to get the 125 in February. It could be March, but we're expecting February.
And so the first, for the total amount for the FTA award is still 1.55 billion.
That's correct.
Okay. And let's see, we understand that there are technical amendments that will be going through that the FTA will look at with the FFGA.
Yeah, I would not call it technical. I would call it just administrative, just minor typo type things.
Okay, and what type of administrative amendments would those be?
I wouldn't even call it an amendment. It's just, if you look on some of the tables, the lines don't line up because they had a break or a formatting issue on a table. So we went through, there was a date missing, there was a zip code missing, there were, minor little things like that. So we sent probably a page of comments to them asking them to clean it up. But it doesn't change the substance. It doesn't change any of the numbers. It doesn't change the effect. It's just cleanup items. And we can provide a list of those items to you if you would like, and we can provide, once we get a final document, if we get a final document from them, we can certainly provide that with the changes highlighted.
What does that mean if you get a final document?
Well, we don't have control of the document. The FTA has the control of the document. We've asked them to make the changes. We expect that they will make the changes, but if they don't, we're ready to execute the document as is. But I think it would look better to have a cleaner copy, so we've asked them if they would make those changes.
Okay, I know that the final document reflects when it went through the HART board and approval by the HART board. And of course, we have the possible review and approval by the City Council, but should there be other amendments to the FFGA, such as reflection of the date of approval and signatures, since we are in a new year when it is signed by the mayor?
That is one of the things that we noted, is that each of the signature blocks has 2023 instead of 2024. If we don't get a revised version, we'll just simply mark through that and change it manually. Again, we hope to get a clean copy, but we're not sure.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it would help any way, shape, or form, but I guess just as the budget chair, I would like to have HART's commitment to ensure that we do get a clean document, and when we do get a new document with those administrative technical things or administrative things taken care of, that we do have it presented to our budget committee.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, members, are there any questions? Okay, we have Council Vice Chair Kia Aina.
Thank you. I don't know if I missed it. I just wanted to better understand and clarify what is included in the maximum FTA awarded, because that's listed in the draft amended grant agreement for $1,717,750,000. I'm just trying to better understand that, since the total grant is for $1.55 billion. Can you explain that a little bit?
Can you tell me which page you're looking at?
It's actually,
Actually, the pages, that's another thing, the page numbers aren't very consistent.
I'm actually
I don't know
not
exactly
looking
where
at,
you're pointing, but I think I can answer the question. The $1.55 billion is the full funding grant agreement amount. We have received other federal funds. We received $70 million in, I want to say 2022, when we received those funds. That was COVID-related relief funds. This year, we received $63,750,000. That was from a congressional appropriation in December of 2022 that we finally was able to get funded. We received recently $30 million of federal highway funds that were transferred over to us from HDOT. And then a long time ago, early in the project, there was $4 million in ARA funds that were provided to the project.
okay, so you just put all of the numbers together?
Yeah, so when the FTA went through, there are some percentage share, proportionate share calculations that they make. They make one based just on the FFGA funding, and then they also look at total federal funding. So those numbers, that 1.7 number that you refer to would, I don't know if that adds up exactly, but I think that's the difference that you're talking about.
And I'm referencing Exhibit A, page 2. But thank you for that. I just wanted to understand where the figure came from, because
Sure.
it wasn't fully explained.
Sure.
Mr. Keen, also, what are any other hindrances after this amended FFGA goes through that may hinder receiving the funds?
Nothing to my knowledge. To receiving, well, I'll say nothing on the 125. When we sign this, the 125 will be released. We can go through the process of submitting the grant information and getting that, like I said, probably in February. The next milestone after that, for the next $250 million tranche, is the award of the City Center Guideway and Stations contract, which we're anticipating for this summer, maybe late summer this year. We're anticipating awarding that. That will trigger the next 250. And then there are 3 other time milestones. One is for the completion of the airport guideway segment, which is anticipated in 2025. The next is the completion of the Dillingham utility work, which is anticipated, I think, in 2026. And then the last tranche didn't have a milestone attached to it, but it was just in 2027, they committed to release the remainder of the funds. I'm not aware of anything that should prohibit that from happening.
Okay, thank you. So among that, that's 5 total increments of disbursement of funds, correct?
That's correct.
And with that, is there a possibility that the FTA may seek further amendments to the FFGA moving forward, waiting for disbursement?
I do not expect them to seek any further amendments or changes to this document.
Okay, thank you. Members? Okay, Councilmember Tupola.
Oh, thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Keen. Thank you for being here. Quick question. You said that the first 744 was released in 2017. Is that correct?
Not the entire 744. The final payment, the most recent payment we've received as part of the 806, the most recent payment we've received under this $1.55 million
was in 2017?
Yeah, and the last appropriation of those funds was back in 2014, so almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, I
So
was
this
going to
is a
say, when
pretty
you said
milestone event for us.
2017, I was like, I thought this was old. They gave us the 806.
Yeah, the appropriation at the federal level was in 2014. The last payment made under it was in 2017.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'd just like to note that, for the public, because we've been talking about the remaining $744 million for a long time. And so that's great. They're going to release 125 million, and then I'm glad that you said what the other amounts were going to be. And Chair, just I have a 2-pager that I used a few years ago to kind of summarize everything from the timeline to the amounts, and I'll have that ready for full council. But it is a lot to grasp. I will say that. Because, we have the 214 million that the city is due, in which we've almost paid out all of that. So thank you for coming forward with this and for the personal explanation of it. It's a lot to understand, but it's good for us, for transparency for the public, that we're well aware of where we're at with the full funding grant agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I saw Councilmember Wire or Vice Chair Wire, and then we have Council Chair Waters.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And just quickly, I just wanted to double check on the milestones. When it says complete, so like the segment to completion, is that when it gets handed over to DTS?
Yes.
Or?
Yes.
Okay, and then the utility relocation, that's just when the work is done on the
Right.
utility? Okay. Well,
And we're on track on both of those. And right now, we don't anticipate any problem completing those based on these dates. So we are on track.
awesome. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay, Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you already answered the question and Budget Chair Cordero pointed it out, but I just want to make it absolutely clear, just so that if something comes up down the road, we're all on the same page. What we're approving, presumably approving today or voting on today, is the amended full funded grant agreement as transmitted to us and approved by the HART Board from the FTA,
Correct.
right? And we've all pointed out, you did with the date on the signature line, that there's certain things that could be cleaned up, but it's probably more important to take care of it and vote on it as transmitted to us.
That's correct.
Because otherwise, if we wanted to make any changes on this document, it'd have to go back to Washington, D.C., possibly get congressional approval as well, which could be time-consuming and cumbersome and add months of delay onto that,
That's correct.
onto the timeline. Okay. And we do acknowledge that there's certain things within the agreement that probably could have been cleaned up, but we're the basic meat of the agreement sets out the important parts, right? Like Councilmember Wire pointed out, certain benchmarks, right?
For milestones, yes.
Milestones. Okay. And the dates aren't necessarily as important as the milestones.
That's correct. And we've had a conversation with the FTA about that what if these dates are off? They said the date isn't the important item here, it's the achievement of the milestone. The date wouldn't jeopardize the release of the funding.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
There's any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Say.
Good morning, Mr. Key.
Good morning.
Just a couple questions. One of my first questions is on page 12 of attachment 3, the baseline cost estimates. I believe your inflation factor is out of whack at 1.0365. I'm concerned about what's happening with this whole thing throughout the world, inflation, supply chain, etc. So is that a realistic number?
Well, it's hard to answer that question because we don't know what it's going to be. There are different components. If you can see the different line items,
Yes.
and some are higher and some are lower. We have had intense discussion about the way inflation was factored into our forecast. The FTA actually back, and these numbers correspond to what was in the recovery plan back in 2022. That was the basis for these. Before the recovery plan was submitted, the FTA actually engaged some folks to come in and do a risk assessment on our forecast. And inflation was one of the big factors that we discussed. And while we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know exactly what it's going to be, everyone got comfortable that we had, adequately considered and had a reasonable basis for the numbers that we used. And many of the inflation numbers that we have actually in our forecast going out over the years compound. So, we feel comfortable and confident in our numbers, but yeah, they could be off depending on what happens in the world economy, but we're comfortable with what we have.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question for me was SCC 80.05 insurance. Throughout this state, throughout this county, everybody's getting whacked on the insurance increases that are happening. Maybe homeowners insurance, maybe commercial insurance. All I'm concerned about is that I hope our forecast in regards to how much we are paying for our insurance is a coverage that will be enough for replacement, as far as replacement of a particular site or project. So that's the only thing I bring up. And finally, where do you have, I was very inquisitive, was it 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
with the lawsuit that is in federal court?
This is the suit related to
Kakako?
the airport guideway. Oh, you're talking about the ward?
Ward
Yes,
property.
yes.
So what is the status when this particular plaintiff can assume that he's going to ask the courts for 100 million in, punitive damages?
Correct.
And would that be incorporated in any of our budget schemes or budget proposals here? Because
Well, a couple of things.
I just want you folks to win. That's all I'm saying. Win the case, settle it, and let's get out of it.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, that is technically outside the scope of what's in the FFGA right now. That's beyond the Civic Center station. However, it nevertheless is something that we continue to work on and try to resolve. We do have, it's an ongoing case, so I'm not sure how much I can say, but it is something that we continue to focus on and we still have a lot of confidence in. There were many motions that were filed, I'll say a year ago, I'm not sure the exact timing, and the judge ruled on those motions and denied many of the claims that the other party was making. That's what was appealed to the Supreme Court. The court just sent a ruling back and basically kicked it back to a jury and said, we're not going to take a ruling on this. We want the jury to see it. We're confident that the jury would see the same thing that the previous judge saw and eliminate those claims. We think that we have a good position on this,
No,
and we're confident
Mr.
going
Keene,
forward.
I do feel the same way. We
Yeah.
do have a very good position, and I truly believe with the appraisals that were discussed at the court hearing, that the folks came out very strong in saying to the judge, it's not improvements to the property as far as rail coming through. It's just raw land at this point in time. So I wish you the very best. It's just that I don't want to be surprised
Sure,
as it pops up next year that, oh, this is the amount that we have to settle.
sure, yeah, we don't either. But we feel we have a good position on it.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up for the general public to understand.
Thank you.
And finally, one thought to, everything is POW as far as the Mokoea and Dillingham. Not Mokoea, was it Mokoea? Yeah, Mokoea and Dillingham, they're service printers. That's POW too, right, as far as condemnation. That's the printing shop on the corner of Mokoea and Dillingham.
I'm not familiar with which property that is.
I think we did try to condemn it.
Takara? Oh, the Takara property? Yeah, that is how
Yeah, okay.
that came through board, through council. I understand there may be a clarification that's needed on the exact mapping of that. So there is one question on it. But yeah, otherwise it's PAL, ready to go. The tenant in the building is relocating to a new location. So yeah.
And one question for myself on a personal note. So we're all finished as far as condemnation from Middle Street all the way to Civic Center. Are there other private owner properties that we have to go through condemnation as we
There
move
could
along?
be. There are still some that are in negotiation. So we try, if you look at, I don't have the numbers in front of me on that particular point, but if you look at the entire route of the guideway, the number of condemnations that we've had to do has been very, very small. We've been very good at negotiating through those. So we hope there's no more, or if there are, it's few, but it's hard to tell until we get through the negotiation.
It's okay. Just that, for the clarification for myself, I would really love to have these type of issues be approved as quickly as possible,
Sure.
and then we can move forward with nothing.
We agree with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? I have one last question relating. You mentioned, and you corrected yourself when you were talking about how the mayor signs on, especially because the agreement is with the city and the federal government for the project. I know that you mentioned BFS, but then corrected it to DTS. Was that always going to DTS under?
Yeah, what I was referring
the
to
20
was a grant system that they use. So DTS has that system with the FDA. They use it for other grants that they have. So we don't have access to that at Hart. So we work with DTS, provide all the information to them. They input for us. We work directly with the FDA on it. We certainly also have to work with BFS in terms of the accounting for the cash.
Okay.
What I was referring to in getting ready to submit the documentation to the FDA, we work with DTS on that.
Okay. I mean, of course, we've seen that DTS has really upped the game with their grants and receiving funding, federal funding as well. But I just wanted to at least know, and you answered it already, that BFS will have that assistance in hand with the funding as well.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I know that we have the Executive Director, Lori Kahikina, here. I don't know if you, no? Okay, no need? Okay, members, we still can ask questions later on, but I would like to go to testimony. With that, we have Natalie Iwasa.
Thank you, Chair Natalie Iwasa, for the record. Speaking in my individual capacity, I apologize I didn't get my written testimony out because of the power outages yesterday, but I have comments on the resolution and I am opposed to the proposed amendment. The FFGA is very complicated. It makes references to a lot of outside documents that are incorporated by that reference, such as the financial plan and some other documents. I ask that you take a look at that and get those documents before you make a final decision as a full council. I'm very concerned still with respect to the GET growth rate. It's aggressive. The costs are at P65, which means only a 65% probability that they will be met. And we still don't know what the cost will be for the city center guideway and stations. I know Hart is very optimistic, but we don't know until we get those bids opened. And we don't know how much this federal grant costs us. That's been a question I've had. We have stricter rules that we have to adhere to, Davis-Bacon wages, Buy America, and I'd like to get an answer on that if possible. So bottom line is that I ask you to do your due diligence for us on behalf of the public to get the information, the documents that relate to this FFGA so that you can make a good decision. And I absolutely oppose the proposed amendment. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And you will be getting your testimony to us today? Oh, sorry. She's on mute.
Yeah, so yes, I will send my written testimony as a follow-up to this. And again, I apologize for not getting it in sooner.
No problem. I definitely understand. It was going through everywhere. Okay, well, at least you're safe. Looks like your light is on and everything. Okay, thank you very much, Natalie. Okay, with that, we have Angela Young.
Happy New Year, Chair and Committee. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of Chair and in support of Hart's Transit Mitigation Fund. So I'm not a critical person.
Hi, Angela. I hate to cut you off, but I think that you may be speaking about the last item on the agenda, which
Can you
also
hear me?
doesn't really relate to Hart. It relates to the city and BFS. So are you talking about full funding grant agreement?
Is it the Bill 40?
No.
Oh.
Okay,
wrong
we'll see you
agenda
there.
item.
We'll see you there, okay? Okay, be safe on the bus. Thanks. Okay, next up, is there anyone else online who wishes to testify? Please use the raise hand feature, or if you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and then when I call your number, I'll press *6. Anybody? Okay, never mind. All right, next up, we will move on to in-person testifiers. We do not have registered in-person testifiers, but is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Okay, seeing none. Members, we are back in discussion. We can go ask questions some more for Hart as well. Anything? Okay, okay. With that, okay. Is this discussion? Okay,
no.
question. Do you have a question?
No, I have no questions.
Okay.
But I just wanted to, I understand how we got here and that this is the best solution for us to be able to move the rail project forward. However, by saying yes to this, we are committing $8.2 billion of taxpayer money to this project over the next 8 years. This year alone, we are earmarking $800 million for this project. What about other projects and needs in our community that would help our constituents in transformative ways? We can't even have those discussions because we are tying our hands to supporting this. Even in today's budget agenda, we are talking about reprogramming ARPA funds and money to help cover obligation to fund hazard pay. At the end of the agenda, we are going to talk about mitigation fund for rail so we can maybe provide some kind of relief to the businesses that are being negatively impacted by rail. There are numerous examples of how we need to better manage our funds so that we can meet the needs of our community and the same needs to be done for rail. And I'll be voting no so that we're all on the same page on this one. I'm voting no on this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Also for the amendment too? Okay, all right. With that, members, are there any other discussions? Okay, Councilmember Say.
Oh, Madam Chair, I'm in strong support of this particular resolution as the amendment to the FFGA. First and foremost, let's go back and think about it, that at least we're 1.9 miles away from the objective of what our predecessors wanted to the Ala Moana Shopping Center. We're going to go and reach Civic Center, and I truly believe that maybe it's not my generation, but your generation and your Keiki's generation will have the opportunity of utilizing the rail, because it is another, how would you say, multimodal alternative to just our automobiles. And, I personally feel that I think for members of this council, we've had many issues in regards to what's that in Kalihi, reserved parking zones, and, people who are parking more and more on the streets, the renters, etc. And the rail will be another alternative. Yes, it's costly, but that's what any project is today. So, when I asked these questions to Mr. Keene, it was more that I'd like to see the project get completed, but all of these small little obstacles that's along the way, can we resolve it also as quickly as possible? So I am in strong support of it at this point in time, and I think the residents of the west side, central Oahu side, will be the beneficiaries, along with those on the primary urban center. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Council Chair Waters.
Thank you, Chair Cordero. No, I just wanted to thank the mayor, managing director, Lori Kaikina, executive director of HARD, Rick, and the HARD board for actually getting this done. It's pretty historic. The fact that the FTA is willing to amend the full funding grant agreement. As mentioned by Mr. Keene, that's rarely, if ever, done. But for, I think, the mayor's hard work and rolling up his sleeves and getting involved, this never would have happened. And it's the right thing. We don't have enough money to go to Ala Moana. It's as simple as that. But we're taking the rail as far as we can. And I'm really excited when we finally get to completion, which there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And this amended full funding grant agreement shows us that. Also, airport is going to open shortly, and I think that's going to be a game changer. I was driving out to Eva Beach this morning, early in the morning, and I saw the cars coming into Honolulu with their headlights on in the dark, and it was packed. And it was bumper to bumper, and traffic just simply was not moving. And it's my hope that someday we can get people out of their cars and onto the train. And I think they will once we complete this. I'm happy to hear that we're not giving up on getting to Ala Moana. And I think that's what we all here on the council need to work with the administration to figure out how we're going to do that and how we're going to pay for that. because I think that'll be a game changer as well. But again, I just want to thank you folks for your hard work in getting this done. I appreciate that it wasn't easy. So thank you, Chair, for having a hearing on this today, and thank you for your patience in not forcing us to have a hearing on this last year. I thought it was important for us not to rush this, but actually to go through committee rather than straight to full council. So I appreciate you all and hope we can support this going forward. Mahalo.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Committee Vice Chair Wire.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, also in full support of the resolution. Many ways see it as pro forma, understanding that this is just reflecting what was already sent over and agreed to in the recovery plan. So appreciate, of course, the hard work of the administration and echo Chair's sentiments, and really appreciate, Director Kaikina and the whole board and all the staff for the work that you're doing. And do think that, with all the problems that were inherited, I think we are getting rail back on track, and, think the community is really excited and looking forward to it. Super appreciate the administration helping us get Auntie Jane Sasaki onto rail before she passed at 102. Waipahu resident. It was the highlight of her day. And I know so many others in our community that are just appreciative of being able to use it and look forward to being able to use it more as it grows. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other discussion? With that, okay, Councilmember Tupola.
Just real fast, I know I don't have a vote, Chair, but I just wanted to say that, the full funding grant agreement is an agreement. It was something that our predecessors had signed on to, that made a commitment. And I think it's important for us to follow through with the commitment that we made, especially because in all the other commitments we make, that's what the people of Oahu are looking forward for us to doing. Now, saying that, definitely this project was way, way bigger than anything that a municipal government could handle. This is why the federal government had to step in. In fact, a project of this size definitely should have been a state or a federal project. But being where we are and knowing what we know and having the cards dealt to us that were dealt to us, I think we're doing the best we can. And so I'll continue to support this, knowing that we are coming through with a commitment and trying to do the best we can to service the people of Honolulu. And I appreciate the transparency. I talked with Lori and Rick yesterday, and I said, in all the years of the rail, this is the first time we've seen numbers go down, because people are finally being realistic with themselves. Hey, this is what we can do. From here to here is what we can do. Can we please truncate? And they're asking the federal government in all realism, this is what we can do. Can you meet us halfway? And I think that that's what we needed this whole time, honesty. Honesty is, we can't do it all the way. We need your help. How do we do this with more people on board? So thank you to them for really turning the tables, cutting contracts where they had to, cutting costs where they had to, changing things so that we could be more fiscally accountable to the public. It's helped us as council members to know that you guys are doing that hard work of saying no to things that we know that we can't do. So thank you to you guys. Thank you to the mayor as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, the chair, Council Chair Waters.
Sorry, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Ray Tellis, Regional Administrator of the Federal Transit Administration, for his hard work, as well as Nuria Fernandez, the Administrator of the FTA. Didn't want to leave them out, because I remember being in a meeting with them, with our mayor, and they've been nothing but supportive of us. So if they're watching, I just want to make sure we're thanking them as well.
Okay, great. You made me nervous about if they're watching. Okay, thank you. Forgot what I was going to say. Well, I guess if they're watching, I could share. Of course, rail is a hot topic and has always been, especially growing up. But more so, seeing that, I know I get teased a lot that I like to share that I will have the most rail stations out of any council district. And along with the negativity here and there, it gave me pause. And it wasn't just my neighbors who stated this, but also a neighbor island senator who shared that, we know that we are hoping for completion, but a project like this is never going to be POW, because not only is it just rail, and not only is it just the development around it, but more connectivity, which is something that really has drawn me from my different stages of I guess, ideals and ideas about the project. And, people had brought up, and this was before any of my time, about extensions, possible routes through Salt Lake Boulevard, or getting to the high corridor of Salt Lake. And even if it's smaller extensions, even if it's through the bus routes, that's when it's never going to be PAL. So I know that we're getting to our completion to our locally preferred alternative, our minimum operating segment, but we have to ensure that just as much as we are talking about the project itself, that we need to continue, I guess, supporting the things that will make this work. So we have a lot of work ahead of us for the different communities around the stations especially. And so I know that we're very invested in that. Okay, with that, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-304 be amended to the hand-carried CD1. Any discussion? And noting the no vote by Councilmember Toba, I will be taking a roll call. Okay? With that, we have Councilmember Kiaina.
Aye.
Councilmember Say. Okay, Councilmember Toba, no. Okay, Vice Chair Wire.
Aye.
Okay, Chair Cordero votes aye. Okay, with that, we will then move the Resolution 23-304 CD1 out for adoption. Any discussion? Noting the reservation of Councilmember Toba, I will go roll call. No vote by Councilmember Toba. We have, okay, first up, Councilmember Kiaina.
Aye.
Councilmember Say. Aye. Councilmember Toba. Vice Chair Wire.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. There are 4 ayes, 1 no. Thank you. Moving forward, we have not with us, excuse me, agenda item number 2, which is Resolution 23-392. Oh, hold on, excuse me. Let me start that over again. We have Resolution 23-299, which, oh, excuse me, let me go back. Okay, with the votes being 4 ayes and 1 no, motion carries. Okay, moving forward, agenda item number 2, Resolution 23-299, which approves and authorizes the reprogramming, receipt, and expenditure of ARPA monies in the amount of $39,701,425. With that, just as an example, this is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 funds in the amount that I just stated in Appendix A to Section 17 of Ordinance 22-14 to be designated as revenue replacement and used for items including but not limited to hazard pay for eligible essential workers employed by the city during the COVID-19 pandemic. For those who are looking online with the H&L documents, you will see the Mayor's Message 234 from 2023 of last year, which was communicated. And then we have the written objection from the Council Communication 292, also in 2023, from both Council Chair Waters and Vice Chair Kiaina to the proposed reprogramming, and requested that the reprogramming action take place via resolution so that the Council may discuss the proposed reprogramming. With that, we have with us from the City Administration, the Managing Director, Mike Formby.
Good morning, Budget Chair Cordero, Vice Chair Wire, Council Chair Waters, Vice Chair Kiaina, and Council members. Mike Formby, Managing Director. If you could indulge me for one moment before I get to the reso. On 23-304, there was a lot of thanks given out by the Council to others, and I want to thank the Council for its critical role in that amendment. I think you all know that Chair Waters participated with the administration and with HART on the recovery plan strategy, and I appreciate that participation. And moving this out to the full council is critical. So thank you all for your vote today. On resolution 23-299, I have to be very careful what I talk about today because we still are in active arbitration with UPW. There was a request made that they stay their arbitration pending our settlement negotiation discussions. They haven't done that yet. I hope they will at some point, but because it's still active, I have to be careful what I say, and if need be, Corporation Counsel will request that we go into executive session. So I also have Andy Kawano here, Director of BFS, to help me when it comes to some of the budget numbers for fiscal year 25, because I think you all know that we expect the fiscal year 25 budget is going to be very tight. And we have to submit the balanced budget to council by March the 2nd. And part of doing that is to be able to create capacity for what we hope would be an appropriation from this council for hazard pay in the fiscal year 25 budget.
I apologize, Managing Director. We have to recess as our connection has failed. Okay. Calling a recess subject to order of the chair. like to call the Committee on Budget back to order. It is 10:03 a.m. And before we lost access via Zoom, we were in the middle of the introduction by the Managing Director, Formby. So if you could please, if I may ask for your indulgence to start over again, please. Please also hit the button. Thank you.
All right, happy to do that. Thank you, Committee Chair Cordero. Mike Formby, Managing Director. Before we lost connectivity, I was saying that we're currently in arbitration with UPW. We had asked UPW to stay the arbitration pending discussions, global settlement discussions with the state and the other counties. But as of today, they have not communicated a stay to us. I hope that they will at some point, and I believe they will. But given the fact that we're still in active arbitration, I have to be very careful that I don't disclose information or say things that might be considered an admission against interest. So what I was basically saying is that this council previously passed resolutions calling upon the administration to provide hazard pay to eligible employees. And I believe the council knows that under the SLFRF U.S. Treasury regulations and guidelines, specifically the Federal Register, there is a provision that's referred to as premium pay, but when you read the fine language, they say it's also known as hazard pay. But those provisions are very specific in their application. The eligibility, the essential workers, and the responding to requirements essentially require that you do a case-by-case analysis. And that would all but frustrate our ability to enter into a global settlement. And I'll give you an example, and I'm looking at the Federal Register. And for your reference, if you want to look at it later, I'm on page 59. But when you look at the Federal Register for premium pay for eligible workers, there's really no big problem there. It's workers that needed to maintain continuity of operations of essential critical infrastructure sectors and additional sectors at each government, at each governmental level. So it could be state, local, or county. So that rule in and of itself is not a challenge. But when you get to the essential work and response to, essential work says is not performed while teleworking, no disagreement there. The unions, I think, HGEA, UPW, and SHOPO have all agreed that those that are full-time teleworking would not have exposure. Involves either one, regular in-person interactions with patients, the public, or co-workers of the individual that is performing the work, or two, regular physical handling of items that were handled by or are to be handled by patients, the public, or co-workers of the individual that is performing the work. So I think we could go through that analysis on our workers, but it is a case-by-case basis. And the one that really presents the biggest challenge to the city and county of Honolulu is the respond to requirement. And in that, the U.S. Treasury prioritizes low and moderate income persons. The level of the award limit is up to $13 per hour and cannot exceed $25,000. And the money also can only go to an individual that has 150% or less AMI. And when you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the all-occupation category for the city and county of Honolulu is $61,420. And under the U.S. Treasury rule, you have to add the hazard pay amount into the salary to see whether or not they exceed the 150% AMI. So essentially what that means is if you have somebody that's making $70,000 and you want to pay them more than $20,000 in hazard pay, and we don't know what that number is going to be yet, you could only go up to 91 because that's 150% of 61. So it presents a challenge to us. It means we would have to do a case-by-case analysis of every single employee to make sure that they meet those three tests. And that's why, although we have the legal right under the law to commit SLFRF, and the council could reprogram, reallocate to hazard pay. Although we have the legal right to do that, it becomes impossible to marry that process with the global settlement discussions. And so the administration has an obligation to present a balanced budget to the council by March 2nd. We need to know what the capacity is in the budget based upon monies that we have reprogrammed to some definable expense so that we can call upon council to appropriate for hazard pay in the fiscal year 25 budget. In the fiscal year 24 budget, there's no appropriation for hazard pay. So the only way for us to create this capacity is through the SLFRF process that we created. Tranche 1 is handled differently than Tranche 2. For Tranche 1, the administration would go through the ad hoc committee to reprogram our $40 million. For council, it requires that we come to council and that council, through this resolution process, which was required because of the 15-day letter objection, that council reprogram. And that creates the capacity, hopefully $80 million, for us then to submit a balanced budget to the council so that you can appropriate to hazard pay. And that's the process that we've discussed with the unions, and we've asked them to work with us on this. The beauty of going through the revenue replacement model, which is what the resolution proposes, is that we can do that between now and the end of fiscal year 24. So that when, in fact, we have to do it before March 2nd, we can get the revenue replacement number programmed so that we can balance the budget by March 2nd and then call upon council to make an appropriation for hazard pay in fiscal year 25. What I can't tell you right now, and I think you all understand this, is that the hazard pay appropriation, which you may be required, I shouldn't say it that way, that you may choose to make in fiscal year 25 will be 80 million. It might be more than 80 million, might be less. And what the state has proposed to the unions is a 2-year payout. So even if you appropriate in fiscal year 25, we could make one payout in the first half of fiscal year 25, which would be in one calendar year, and the second payout in the second half of fiscal year 25, which would be in a following calendar year. So there's tax benefits to the workers in doing that. But the point is, we have to have capacity in the budget before we actually pass the budget on July 1st, 2024. So what we've called upon the council to do is understanding your priority for hazard pay, your policy priority for hazard pay, and the administration's support of that as well. For all those that are eligible, essential, and entitled to hazard pay, we've asked you to create capacity in the budget by allowing us to pay down OPEB this year, in fiscal year 24. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If the question gets into an area that might be protected or privileged under the UPW arbitration, we'll call for executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move to questions, I would like to welcome Councilmember Dos Santos Tam to the committee. We almost have a full council here. It's cool. Okay. With the questions, I guess you mentioned about OPEB and paying down OPEB this year. How much is that total that would need to be paid down?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll call on Andrew Kawano to tell you what the typical annual appropriation would be for OPEB. But what we would do is apply the 80 million capacity that would be created by this reso plus the administration set aside of 40 million to take an additional 80 million paid down in OPEB so that it would give us relief in the fiscal year 25 budget. But Andy, if you could help them on our annual OPEB appropriation.
Good morning, Budget Chair Cordero, Chair Waters, Vice Budget Chair Wire, Honorable Council members. Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, for the record. I really do believe Managing Director explained what we plan to do very well. The plan is to come to agreement to reprogram an aggregate amount of approximately $80 million such that we can encumber the $80 million of FRF funding, by June 30, 2024, to be expended to supplement our payment on OPEB. So for OPEB, So OPEB's post-retirement health benefits, right? So we have what's currently due and what's due in the future for employees that haven't retired yet but have vested benefits. We typically pay in the neighborhood of $200 million annually for the OPEB provisional. And that provisional is always one of the larger line items in the provisional section of our operating budget ordinance. So if we do that, we create capacity, we effectively reduce the OPEB payment by about $80 million going forward, and then we can propose to council for council approval and appropriation to make the hazard pay payment as necessary as it becomes due. So that's where we're coming from. The other concern that we have to be aware about is for Tranche 2, so council's share of FRF. We put it in the Ordinance 22-14 budget. So that's the CIP budget that covers FY23 and FY24. Come June 30, 2024, any unspent appropriation would lapse. So we would have to re-budget that amount, if you will, and essentially start again. The risk, if we do that, is that for FRF, FRF funds have to be obligated in general by December 31st, 2024. And if we don't obligate, so obligation generally means enter into a contract, executed contract, the money goes back to Treasury. And, we want to avoid that at all costs. We want to spend as much as we can, as efficiently as we can spend FRF, such that we can create capacity to, address the hazard pay issue with your support.
Okay, thank you. And for clarification for the general public, OPEB is other post-employment benefits, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what type of benefits or funding goes into that provisional?
It's essentially what's funded for health benefits for government workers who have retired.
Okay, thank you. And will all the proposed funding for this transfer or reprogramming funds go to the advance payment or down, the payment for OPEB?
Yes.
Okay, and you mentioned this, with the upcoming CIP deadline from 2022 or FY23, but FY or calendar year 2022 of June 30, 2024. That's how you determine the specific expenditure A projects to then be reprogrammed to OPEB because of that impending deadline, and it just wasn't started?
Well, in the resolution, we identified the Trans 2 projects that are not, that we have not encumbered yet or obligated yet. And those projects were identified, and the aggregate of those projects approximate an amount approaching $40 million. We already have $40 million from Tranche 1, which is the administration's share of FRF. We are looking at approximately $40 million from council's share of our FRF in Tranche 2.
Okay. I know you mentioned that it will, all the reprogram funds will go to OPEB, but has the administration identified any other expense categories which will be funded with the reprogrammed funds?
We looked at other expense categories, and a lot of them are very small, in terms of dollars. We're talking about a large amount of money, and we did our research and feel that paying down OPEB, which benefits, the retirement group of city employees, makes the most sense and is the most efficient way of spending the FRF fund under the revenue replacement classification.
Okay, so no other categories then?
No.
Okay, members, questions? Okay, hold on. Okay, Councilmember Toba.
Thank you, Chair. This resolution, Director, reprograms money that the council had originally added to help our communities and other programs. Will these cuts affect any of the city's programs?
It will not affect the city's ongoing programs and mayor's priorities. Quite a few of those programs were very difficult to get off the ground. Complying with FRF rules, laws, and regulations is a very complex task. And as a result, we weren't able to, in most cases, get those projects moving along and obligated. So we feel that, making use of the FRF funds that appear to be in excess at this point to pay down our OPEB liability makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Councilmember Tupola followed, Councilmember Say followed by Councilmember Tupola, followed by Committee Vice Chair Wire, and then Council Chair Waters.
Director Kawano, can you walk me through the process? In 2021, when we created the appendix on the capital improvement project for the tranche 2, the council appropriated, right, those funds. After it's appropriated, it is encumbered. I want the members to understand what the process is. Once it is encumbered, that's where Treasury can say to you, it's okay at the federal level that we have these internal deadlines and we met the obligation as far as having it encumbered. Would they just say, okay, sign off on it? As far as how the process works.
So tranche 2 was adopted
22.
Into ordinance during the 2020 budget session, 2022 budget session, so March 2022 through June 2022. So council during that session adopted ordinance 22-14, which essentially is the CIP ordinance for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Yeah. So that's the ordinance component approved by council. With regard to Treasury,
Yes.
Treasury uses the term obligate. We have to obligate the funding no later than December 31st, 2024. The tricky part with regard to the CIP ordinance is that it lapses after 2 years, right? So for city purposes, the ordinance 2214 essentially lapses if appropriations are not encumbered. So we use the term encumbered, which essentially gets down to whether or not we have a contract, executed contract to expend the funds or not. Assuming that we don't get to executed contracts by June 30, 2024 with regard to ordinance, the money lapses with regard to ordinance, and we'd have to go through, more likely than not, this current upcoming budget session, we'd have to go through a reprogramming of the funds not expended. And I think we greatly put at risk not expending and obligating per Treasury rules by 12/31/24 if we have to go through the process. And that's why administration believes using the funding that we'll have available at the end of this current fiscal year to pay down OPEB makes a lot of sense, because we want to ensure that we expend as much of the FRF funding as possible.
So we're using that fund, the FRF funds, to pay down on the employer's contribution to the EUTF?
The OPEB.
OPEB?
Yeah.
Other pension?
Yeah,
the pension.
Yeah.
No, my thought is that a Department of Treasury policy? Why can't you just say, yes, we're going to pay it off as far as using it for hazardous pay? Like,
It's due to, as Managing Director explained, the fact that the federal laws and regulations require, if we go through that direct approach, a case-by-case analysis of each claim for hazard pay, and that would frustrate the settlement process that the unions are asking for, and that they've done. You know, there's precedent set because other counties have actually settled for certain unions.
I
And
see.
MD?
Councilmember Say, if I could add to that just briefly, and I'm speaking just from discussions that I've had, and I can get more specific in executive session, but the way the state and the county have approached hazard pay is that it is a fiscal issue. And it's a fiscal issue at a budget level for both the state and the county. And so we have purposefully stayed away from percentages awarded to employees because we know if we take the settlement agreements and the decisions of arbitration and we apply those percentages at the state and the county, it's not workable. We would have to do something that nobody wants to do. And so what we've discussed with the unions is focusing on a number that the county can responsibly appropriate to hazard pay, and the state can responsibly appropriate, and then we'll have to figure out how that gets applied to the group. And how it gets applied to the group is likely not going to be 100% in conformance with the Federal Register. And that's the challenge of applying the money to hazard pay versus revenue replacement. They're both legal. So we're not doing something illegal. But by creating capacity in the budget, it gives us more capacity to negotiate with the unions, because I can tell you that I believe their attitude in negotiation is that they would rather include more people in the group than exclude people from the group. And so that's sort of the theory. And if you want more details, we can go into executive session and I can share some early numbers that give us cause for concern.
No, my thoughts is that when you do the negotiations, could you not spread it out from what you say, the 2 years, but 4 years in trying to address all of those individual claims that you have? And then you stated for the record, the total amount that they can get is $25,000, right? Per claim?
Under the Federal Register.
Yeah, see, but it's not going to be 25,000. It's going to be below the 25,000 for the county of Oahu because of the resources that we may not have.
Yeah, so I don't believe there would be any way to spread it out over 4 years if you did it under the Federal Register, because we only have 2 years from the point that we obligate, which is December of '24. So the expenditure timeframe is only 2 years.
Wow.
So we've looked at this many different ways. And we really, and also I'd have to say that the payout, the term of the payout is also a union negotiation issue. So I don't think we could unilaterally dictate to them.
No, the only reason I'm trying to get as many people in this class action lawsuit, but you gave me conditions as an example. Anybody that's 150% AMI will not qualify, correct? Which
Correct.
you may have employees who are making more than 150 AMI, like some of our officers, firefighters, etc. So I'm just trying to figure it out. What's the best approach? And then finally, Managing Director, are we now back into another cycle of negotiations for collective bargaining? After the 4-year contracts that most of them had.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last.
Are we now back into negotiations for the next round of collective bargaining?
Okay, so I'll share with you an email that I sent this morning to an OTS employee who emailed me in response to the council's resolution on hazard pay for bus drivers. The OTS Teamsters contract does not have a hazard pay provision in it. So right now what the state and the county are looking at is our obligation to employees that are covered in their collective bargaining agreement by hazard pay provisions. We're not looking at those that are not. And what I emailed to that employee is that I suspect that issue will be becoming a bargaining point for them in their 2025 negotiation, because they may put that on the table. But for the current round, it's not on the table. And council member, I just wanted to clarify, it's not just earning up to 150, it's what they earn plus you add the hazard pay onto that, that cannot exceed 150. So it actually is quite a bit below 150 AMI.
Chair, may I?
Oh, thank you. Okay, sorry. Councilmember Tupola, followed by Committee Vice Chair Wire, followed by Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. MD, thank you for your explanation. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. That was very detailed. In fact, a lot of the things I had questions with, you went through seamlessly to explain to us. Just to summarize the statement made by case. So you said you guys can't take it case by case, but the unions are, as far as determining who will get hazard pay and who won't. All we're doing is setting aside some money, because this money will not be all the money that will be needed to cover it. So what you're saying is that you guys are not going case by case. The unions are, and they're coming to the collective bargaining table with their amounts. Is that correct?
Council member, I actually don't know the answer to that yet, but if I look at other settlement agreements, the ones that happened on Maui, there were initial agreements as to who would be eligible and who would not be eligible,
right,
as well as the time frame that the hazard pay would be applied. And in one case, it was 18 months. In one case, it was 24 months. So all of those are open for negotiation. And that includes things that were not put on the table in prior settlement agreements or arbitrations. So we could, theoretically, use the OSHA guidelines for risk exposure and then ask the unions to allow us to actually classify in a different way. For us, the goal is to make sure that we treat people fairly and that we have enough money to settle.
So
how we do that is really open for discussion.
So I think the way you're explaining it is kind of answering my question. So you guys are the ones who are going to determine eligibility, and then that will be given to the unions, and that's what you're at the table talking about.
That's correct, and it's not just the county of Oahu, but it's the other counties and the state as well.
Oh, okay, I understand that. And just for clarity, one more time, since I was the one who introduced that resolution, the OTS workers did not have hazard pay inside of their collective bargaining contract.
Well, I'm relying upon the president of OTS, Robert Yu, and he sent me an email saying that there's no provision in their current contract. So it may become an issue in the 2025 negotiation, but currently there's no provision.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. They didn't bring that up to me, but thank you for clarifying that. I mean, we do want to give love and appreciation to all the bus drivers, but per the law for the collective bargaining, that would have to be included. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Committee Vice Chair Wire, followed by Council Chair Tommy Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo, MD. Just wanted to make sure I was following. So when we look at, thank you for outlining all the requirements for hazard pay. For revenue replacement, are there any requirements we should be aware of, or it's pretty straightforward?
There are requirements in the Federal Register, and BFS and Corporation Council have also already looked at that and done the calculations. And I'll let Director Kawano share with you what they've determined.
So in general, FRF expenditures that fall under the revenue replacement classification have to be for regular general government services and expenses. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. And based on what we've been hearing, it sounds like you're saying the conversation about hazard pay is ultimately a contract question, and there is an answer to it. Ideally, it's settled and not by an arbitrator, and I don't want to dive into legal analysis, but it's pretty much something the city would possibly owe based on just the terms of the contracts they were in with workers.
Oh, excuse me, repeat the last part of that question again, I'm sorry. Council member.
Pretty much the assessment for hazard pay is just us upholding the contract requirements, however they're going to be interpreted by the city or the arbitrator.
That's where we are now, yes, based on MD's explanation of the status.
Okay. And then where would the funds be in the proposed budget when we're looking at the upcoming proposed budget in March?
So we would propose a general fund source of fund. We would propose an appropriation that is funded by the general fund for council review and approval, specific to hazard pay.
Okay. And so, and sorry if you said this already, but by the time we get to the proposed budget, do we anticipate having the full amount or the proposed settlement amount in that proposed budget?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Currently, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the discussion. And by the way, just for members' benefit, when the administration does a 15-day letter request to move funds, it's automatically moved unless a council member objects. So while I'm not necessarily objecting to the idea of moving the funds from ARPA to OPEB, I thought it was important, and if I may speak for Vice Chair Kiaina, to simply lodge the objection in order to require the administration to go by way of resolution. So just for folks who didn't know that, that's how you do it. Now, okay, so as I mentioned, I'm not necessarily against using the ARPA funds from the second tranche, which amounts to about $40 million for OPEB. But my concern is that once we do that, which by the way, OPEB amounts to, as you said, $200 million every year. It's a bill we have to pay. So it's a good use of the money as long as the Treasury guidelines say we can do it. Having said that, I do believe that hazard pay is appropriate, right? Other counties have already paid it. As you mentioned, we're in arbitration and or a possible lawsuit if we don't pay it. So that's something that I'm happy that both the council and the administration is taking seriously. Now, my concern, though, is that once we move the second tranche money over from ARPA to OPEB, is the administration going to create a separate line item in the budget that's going to be submitted in a few weeks to the council, setting aside money that otherwise would have been used for OPEB for hazard pay? Or are we, the council, then going to be tasked with a very difficult job of finding money within the budget in order to pay hazard pay?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chair Waters. I can be corrected by Director Kawano, but I can tell you that the mayor and myself, the intention is to have a line item for hazard pay that would then be appropriated by the council in the adopted budget. That's the commitment that the administration has made, and that was the policy preference of this council. So we're going to be true to that. And I believe that's the only way that we could actually submit a balanced budget to you on March the 2nd, is to have an accounting for that $80 million that we're going to put down for prepay on OPEB. So that's the intention, and we would not deviate from that. And like I said, I'm standing here today, I don't know that $80 million is going to be enough. So there may be an additional appropriation required over that amount. I just don't know.
Terrific, because whoever does it, whether it's administration or the council, that's going to be a difficult job, right? Because we don't want to have to cut city services to find the money for hazard pay, despite the fact that our workers are entitled to it. Initially, I thought, since it's in ARPA, it's almost like it's being in the bank. We can't touch it. You can, of course, because it's already appropriated, but at least it's there, it's safe. We know that we have at least $40 million. At the same time, I really appreciate what you're saying, that the feds are saying we have to obligate the money by the end of 2024. So that gets us off the hook. But at the same time, let me ask you this. The guidelines within the federal treasury guidelines I'm talking about, they tell us with some flexibility who's eligible and who's not, which might help us in the negotiations if we say, hey, look, we got $80 million, 40 from the first tranche, 40 from the second tranche. The guidelines are pretty clear who's eligible, who's not. Versus if we just do a payout from the general fund, now you're looking at what was in the collective bargaining agreement. I think it was $13. That could be way over per employee, way over the $25,000 cap. At least with using the federal treasury guidelines, it's capped at $25,000, right? If we don't use these guidelines, we could pay each employee well over $25,000, possibly, right? Especially when we have police officers who are working 20 hours a day. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Thank you for that consideration, Chair Waters. I can tell you that you're right, it's all open to negotiation, and I think the city intends to take a fiscally prudent and conservative position in negotiation, and we can certainly use the Federal Register, just like we were using the OSHA risk assessment 4 levels. We can use all of that in our negotiations. I think the fact that the federal government came up with an administrative process for deciding who could receive hazard pay under SLFRF is helpful. The problem is that it does require a case-by-case analysis, and I don't know how long it would take for us to get through that process for a workforce of 10,000 employees. I can share numbers with you in executive session that will give you some idea of how complicated this can become and why one of the beauties of a global settlement is that you take some of that administrative burden and complication out of the process, which attorneys in litigation do all the time, understanding that there's cost of defense. And you're trying to treat people fairly. That's sort of how we're looking at it on the global settlement. But to go through the Federal Register process, I can't even imagine how many months or years it would take us to go through that analysis. And then you would probably have grievances. People would appeal if we decided that under the process they were not eligible. And even the Federal Register allows you to submit written justifications on why someone should receive hazard pay after the process says they don't receive hazard pay. So it's just something that could go on and on and on as we're trying to get through the budget. And if we're going to submit a balanced budget to you by March 2nd, we need to know now, preferably in January, not February, what that capacity is. I don't know how we submit a balanced budget if we say to you, we're going to go through this process and we're going to start it, but not know when it's going to end. And that's the challenge of it. And I understand exactly what you're saying. And I would want to use these guidelines to help us, because the truth is, if the negotiations fail, and that's a possibility, that we don't come to an agreement with the unions, then we may end up right back here. And yet we don't have much time to do it.
That's my concern as well, and I think that was really clear. Although, I have my lawyer hat on now, obligated versus encumbered, right? If we in this resolution say we hereby obligate the money for hazard pay, I mean, that's something for the lawyers to figure out whether or not that satisfies the Treasury. But having said that, I feel a little bit better knowing that the administration is going to have a line item set aside money, right? And presumably it's 80 million, right? 40 from the first tranche, 40 from the second. And I understand we don't want to talk numbers at this point, but whatever it is, that's going to be set aside so that the council doesn't have to go in and do the hard work and say, ooh, sorry, HPD, we're going to have to cut. Sorry, fire department, we're going to have to cut. I'd rather the administration do it than us, just to be selfish about that. Or at least us working together through the budgetary process. But having said that, okay, one of the things I pride myself in is making things as simple as possible. And while you're not talking numbers, I kind of wanted to throw out my quick analysis, right? So according to the Treasury guidelines, the statute defines premium pay as an amount of up to $13 per hour, right? In addition to wages or remuneration the eligible worker otherwise receives for all work performed by the eligible worker during COVID-19 public health emergency. Such amount may not exceed $25,000 per worker, right? Without getting too much into the whole AMI argument, but if the city has 10,000 workers, right? You multiply that by 25,000, that's 250 million, which we absolutely don't have. But if memory serves me correctly, we have about 3,000 vacancies. So now we're only talking about 7,000 workers, right? You multiply that by 25,000, we're talking about 175 million. But then you look at page 225 of the Treasury guidelines, when they define what essential worker is, the interim final rule defined essential work as work that, one, is not performed while teleworking from a residence. So we can take all the people who are working from home, boom, you're not eligible. So do we know how many workers were working from home?
So Chair Waters, thank you for the question. We did do a survey process department by department. We aggregated all of the information, who was on telework, who was on long-term workers' compensation, who was out for sick, and we're compiling that right now. And I can give you some numbers, but I'd rather go into executive session to do that. But I can tell you that for a very small number of workers, that would be our highest level of exposure, it would exceed 25,000 per person. So that's why we're concerned, is that there are some people that were in high-risk classifications, jobs, that potentially it would be above 25,000, and then there are many people that are below that, many.
I mean, good point, because what was negotiated in their employee contract versus what's required under the Treasury guidelines could be two different numbers, but okay, thank you. I appreciate the discussion very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have one question. If I could refer to the resolution. First off, on page 2, you mentioned the mayor's message 234-2023 in the amount of approximately $39,011,512. And then on page 5, maybe after the table, it then states in the be it resolved clause that the City Council of the City and County of Honolulu hereby approves a reprogramming of $39,701,425. That number that we would reprogram is more than the number as stated or referenced, I would say, in the mayor's message. Are they meant to be consistent with each other, or is there a reason there's two different numbers?
There are two different numbers, and Committee Chair, I'd like to get you a follow-up confirmation of what I'm going to say. But I believe at the time that the mayor's message was submitted, the best estimate was $39,11,512. And by the time the reso was submitted, Andrew Malahoff had gone through the actual Appendix A and had come up with a refined number, so it would be the larger number. And I'll tell the council members today that it may be when we go through this process, after we do the reprogramming of the council's tranche and our reprogramming of the administration's tranche, we'll have more than 80 million. And that's when I would like to come back to council and request that we consider what we do with that extra money over 80 million. Because if there is capacity, I would like to come back to the council and talk about another payment to RURP, the Rental and Utility Relief Program. That program is so vital to the lowest group of ALICE population to pay their rents and their utility. And that program is set to basically run down in March, April timeframe. And I think it's very important that if we have over 80, if we end up, after we do all the numbers, we have 85 or 87, that we consider putting some of that additional money into that population that need help the most in our economy. So we won't know the actual numbers until the very end, until we actually do the reprogramming. But right now, I would go on the 39,701 figure.
Okay. Is there any way that we'll receive a new mayor's message with a new number?
As we go through this process of determining exactly what monies will be set aside, we will keep you updated. And absolutely, I mean, the goal is to reach 80 million, but if we go above that, I think we'll come back to council.
Okay. Just because the number that we have for approval of the reprogram funds is about 600 something, 689 more $1 million, or I guess thousands, or no, millions of dollars more than, is it millions or thousands, than the original mayor's message. Are we going to have an amendment request for the resolution itself to add to the clauses?
Well, the be it resolved figure is the correct figure based upon the table above.
Okay.
So I don't believe
It's not necessary.
I think the whereas before is historical for what we put
Okay.
in there's no need, I believe, to amend the reso because the be it resolved is consistent with the table.
Okay. Okay. Members, any other discussion or questions? Okay. With that, we'll move to testimony. I don't have any registered online testifiers, but is there anyone else who wishes to testify online? Seeing none, we don't have any registered in-person testifiers. Is there anyone who wishes to testify in person relating to Resolution 23-299? Seeing none? Okay, members, we are back in discussion. We can still have discussion or have questions for... Oh, okay. Okay, since we're back in discussion, we have Council Vice Chair Kia Aina.
Thank you, Chair. I just have some comments. I wanted to note for my colleagues and the general public that I objected to the reprogramming proposal in November by the administration by a 15-day letter with Chair Waters, only because I thought it was important for the administration to have this discussion with the council today, so we are all on the same page. I strongly support hazard pay for qualified employees, and I also understand that ensuring we have adequate funding to pay for that hazard pay is going to require sacrifice by all of us in our priorities, both the administration and the city council. I will note that nearly $7 million of the proposed reprogramming of ARPA funds today are for a project that I had proposed in the current budget. And while I continue to believe that almost all of these projects are important, I know that we need to start making decisions that result in expending as much of the ARPA funds as possible so that we can start identifying a budget to pay for hazard pay for our city employees. So I just wanted to commend the administration for doing all of the due diligence to provide us with the greatest flexibility to get us there, and working with the city council to find a solution. And I also wanted to thank Chair Waters for just going into the details to make sure that how we do this is the right way to do it, because we are all looking for the same solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. I know you have a busy calendar. We still have a number of items more to do, so I'm not sure if you want to go into executive session, but at some point I would love to hear the numbers from the administration just to get a better understanding. But I might ask that you defer the measure today rather than sending it to full council, just so that we can flesh out the numbers as we talked about and just get a better handle on this. I note that
Definitely.
not all council members are here, although we do have 8 of us, 8
Yeah,
of 9. So
it's-
that's good.
That is
But
good.
I would just ask that we give it a little bit more thought. I'm not objecting to it necessarily, just need a little bit more information. Thank you.
Okay. Members, any thoughts on the executive session? Or also, we can have a whole special budget committee dedicated to this as well. Sorry, Committee Vice Chair Wire.
Yeah, no, I think I'm supportive of that too. Understanding that the money just needs to be obligated by the end of the year. And given the conversation we've had, I think as admin prepares budget, they can still contemplate this amount seemingly most likely coming over, but we're waiting to see before we make a final decision. Is that the takeaway I can
I'm
take?
sorry, what was the last question?
Well, just because if we extend it a month, it puts it closer to when we get the budget. So just wanted to kind of get a temperature that it sounds like we're just wanting to flesh out and get more info on the numbers, but doesn't seem to be bigger concerns.
Okay, I'll hear from the rest of the members too. Okay, any other questions, committee?
That was the
Vice
question
Chair? Okay,
for
Council Vice Chair
discussion.
Keaina.
Chair, I concur with your recommendation that we hold a special budget committee because of the time constraints.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that the appropriate parties could get together and expeditiously move this process forward so that they have ample time prior to their finalizing numbers for the budget, as well as yourself
Thank you.
in finalizing the budget resolution for the city council.
Yes. I do have to say, you know, when I was contemplating my agenda, members, that I really was wanting to have like actually two separate meetings in the month of January, solely, not just solely for this, but of course for other bigger ticket items that we need information on, and especially for discussion that will require executive session. With that, I can defer and then move this to the next scheduled, if it's a special meeting as well. But that's where I was looking forward to, and even anticipating once again as I was planning for this meeting. So, any other discussion on this? Nope. Okay. With that, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-299 be postponed to a date and time to be determined by the chair. Members, I will need your indulgence and assistance for polling for the next committee, okay? And it would be super great. You know, we almost have a full council here, and hopefully can have a full council at that future meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Moving forward to agenda item number 3. We have Resolution 24-1, which authorizes the transfer not to exceed 422 million. No, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Not to exceed 422,000 in general fund monies from the Department of Information Technology Administration activity. So this is from DIT administration activity. Their current expenses, character of expenditure, to DIT administrative activity equipment current expenses, character of expenditure. So it's in the same administration activity, but it's just going from current expenses to equipment. Okay, members, 422,000 from current expenses to equipment for fiscal year 2024 to purchase new storage equipment to allow for the storage of various video data feeds from multiple city sites. With us from the city administration, we have Deputy Director Stephen Courtney with us from the department. Hey, you're up there already, so just press the button. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah, good morning, Budget Chair, City Council Chair, and members of the City Council. My name is Stephen Courtney, Deputy Director for Information Technology. Resolution 24-1, Transfer of Funds. DIT is requesting the transfer of $422,000 from current expense to equipment. These funds are needed for new storage equipment to allow for the video feeds from multiple city sites.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And is there a reason, so I know that it's going from the character of expenditure of current expenses to equipment. Is there a reason why it needs to go back to equipment specifically?
Okay, I guess to more characterize it, originally the funds were being utilized from what we call storage as a service, and BFS had characterized it. That's how it should be done, but we found that it would be more efficient to actually move it over to equipment in regards to how we're going to actually utilize that equipment. And so that's the reason why I had to move it over, because we're going to get it out of this storage as a service.
Okay, so for additional storage equipment, that is normally budgeted through the equipment line item, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and normally how much do you budget for it for within the DIT administrative activity?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up my division chief, Brian Mayata, he can probably better answer that question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Division Chief, for being here.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, around $600,000.
around $600,000. And normally each fiscal year that gets spent down.
Yes.
Okay, got it. And what city sites video feeds will be stored?
Okay, these are from we have this system called ACAM, so these are mostly the city buildings, similar to like FMB. We have video feeds coming from these city buildings, and so those are the feeds that we do need more storage for.
Are they security video feeds?
Yeah, yes, they would be more related to security. Yes.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking when it said video feeds, of course, I think about how the Honolulu Zoo has their video feeds that's on YouTube that pops up often for the safari and stuff like that. Or other types of feeds that even ENV does for educational purposes. So nothing like that, yeah.
No.
Okay. Okay. And how long will these video feeds be stored?
30 days.
And okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, members, any questions relating to this transfer of 422,000? Okay, within the same activity though. Okay, perfect. Thank you. We will now go to testimony. We do not have registered online testifiers, but I do see Angela Young. This is relating to the transfer of funds for Department of Information Technology. Angela Young. Okay, seeing none, it might be for another item. We will now move into in-person testifiers. We do not have any registered testifiers, but do we have anyone in person who wishes to testify on this item? Okay, seeing none, moving forward, members, we are back in discussion relating to this transfer. Okay, looks good. And it doesn't seem like, with storage, they do happen to last every few years or so, right? And then we will have to possibly look at storage again, yeah? Oh, sorry, can you press the button?
Yeah, storage is always increasing, so
Understood.
that is something, and the technology is changing as well.
Okay, and I guess for the storage that we do have, since it does last 30 days, are we able to, I guess, replace the data so that we don't have to get more storage, I guess, right over the current data, so we don't have to request for more storage?
Yes, it does happen where it does right over it.
Right over,
and again,
okay.
But it's normally 30 days is enough time.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much. Okay, any other discussion, questions? Okay, with that, moving forward, the chair recommends that Resolution 24-1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Okay, any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving forward to agenda item number 4, which is Resolution 23-290, which authorizes transfer not to exceed $41,667 in general fund monies from the Provision for Grants, Partnerships, and Security Activity Current Expenses character of expenditure to the Office of the Managing Director, Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency Activity in their current expenses character of expenditure for the fiscal year 2024 to meet matching fund requirements for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Federal Emergency Management Agency grant to conduct assessments of several city-owned facilities to determine the potential for hurricane retrofits. Once again, this is from the Provision for Grants, Partnerships, and Security Activity in the current expenses character of expenditure to the Office of the Managing Director under OCCSR under their current expenses character of expenditure at the amount of $41,667. With us from the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, we have the Executive Director, Matt Gonzer, with us. Hello. Happy New Year.
Aloha, Happy New Year. Matt Gonzer, Executive Director for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. We've come to the Council for this grant in the past. We are excited now that through the last fiscal year, we worked on a new procurement vehicle that would really expedite this kind of work. So through a new master agreement opportunity, we will definitely encumber the requested matching funds this fiscal year. And for your interest and awareness, this is a grant that we received following one of the many disaster declarations way back in 2018. This is a partnership from CCSR over to the Department of Emergency Management. They've coordinated through the Department of Design and Construction and obviously the Department of Parks and Recreation, where we're looking to assess current multipurpose rooms or other big gym facilities to see where we can increase shelter or best available refuge at city facilities, where historically a lot of our shelters are at Department of Education school facilities. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, so the transfer of funds is in the same amount that was originally requested back in fiscal year 2022, yeah?
That's correct. And this is the FEMA required 25% non-federal match for their grant programs.
Okay, so since this is the same amount and as the 25% back in fiscal year 2022, did it lapse when we transferred that last $41,667?
That is correct.
It did. Okay. Did we lapse it too late? I mean, when we did in FY22 was in October, right?
The approval, I believe, was back in, I don't remember the month, I would have to check, but from receipt of the grant, pursuing traditional procurement, it was determined that we should actually slow down a little bit to develop this master agreement vehicle, which then positions ourselves to do more of this kind of work moving forward. So it was a little bit slowed down so that we can go faster now.
I kind of don't understand it because we did approve of it, right? And then it lapsed, and then we're here again because we're here again with the same amount, the 25%, because it lapsed, and then, but we're taking it out of FY24 funding.
That's correct. So annually, the city allots, through council's approval, a certain amount of money in this provisional account. We sort of anecdotally call it the grant matching account for our purposes, and this is a small component within the current fiscal year's account.
I don't know if this is for you or for Director Kawano relating to the provision where this came from, which is for grants, partnerships, and security activity, but I don't know if we normally spend that down each fiscal year or since FY22.
I wouldn't be able to answer that now. I'm sure we could answer that historically over the last couple of years. There's been an interest from council and the administration in ensuring that there's sufficient funding for grants that we know are coming or anticipating. And that's the purpose of this, to utilize it for us to be competitive, to go after federal funding opportunities.
Right. Okay, I mean, but we did have it in FY22, but just didn't expend it.
Correct. Council approved a transfer to CCSR, and we did not encumber it in that fiscal year.
I still understand why.
Through the procurement vehicle, it was determined that it wasn't the best approach to do a traditional open request for assessment services. And through consultation with DDC and the Department of Emergency Management, it was determined that we needed to develop this master agreement, which is a different kind of open procurement vehicle, which now allows us, because we have the system on the books, to do more of this kind of work beyond just this granting opportunity.
Okay, and that is explained, I see, in Mayor's Message 240-2023, which, as you mentioned, DDC, so you folks, OCCSR, DEM, and DDC, a master agreement for structural engineering contracting services for fiscal year 24.
That is correct.
Okay then. Okay, all right. Members, any questions for the director, for budget director also? Okay. With that, we'll move to testimony. We don't have any registered in online testifiers, but is there anyone who wishes to testify? I would like to remind those online, if you're on the phone, you press *9 to raise your hand, and then when I call your number, press *6 to unmute. Okay, seeing none, I'm now going to in-person testifiers. We don't have any registered in-person testifiers, but is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Nope. Okay, seeing none. Any other discussion? Okay, thank you. My follow-up question is, while we were developing the master agreement or master agreement with DDC and DEM, since, of course, this is a 25% that is required by FEMA for the city to disperse or to put forward, would we, Did they have any requirements or a deadline for our 25%?
So we actually didn't request this back in fiscal year 23. We didn't request it partly because the master agreement mechanism was being developed, and also we went through a grant extension process with HIEMA and FEMA so that we can get the grant money this year and we can encumber it within the period of performance.
Okay, that's great. And since you mentioned HIEMA, is this are other counties also doing the same, I guess, 25%? Or did they get the same type of grant?
I don't know what kinds of grants they have received, but for all FEMA money, there's typically a 25% non-federal match for any federal FEMA grants that we receive.
Okay, great to know. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, members, any other questions or discussions? We are back in discussion. Okay. Oh, seeing none. Sorry, I was too close. Okay, the chair recommends that resolution 23-290 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, Director. Okay, moving forward, we have Bill 59, providing incentives for eligible film studio facilities. Members, the committee amended the bill and then postponed further action at our October 17, 2023 meeting. Of course, we have our introducer, committee voting member, Toba. If you want to just ease us and excuse me. Yeah.
No, totally support the bill. So I'm hoping that this will move forward and looking forward to discussion.
Awesome. Okay. With us from the administration, we have both the Director for Department of Budget and Fiscal Services, Director Kawano, and we have Walea Constantinou. Oh, sorry. Please let me know how to say your name. Constantinou, Film Industry Development Specialist with us. And you can both come up and, piggyback off of each other. But whoever wants to go first, so that we can proceed with our discussion, yeah? Okay, perfect. It looks on. Yay.
Yep. Budget Chair Cordero, Chair Waters, Vice Chair Kia'aina, Vice Budget Chair Wire, and Honorable Council members, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. We want to thank Councilmember Talba for sponsoring Bill 59. The administration feels that it's a bill that, if we do properly, will not result in creating any significant financial or administrative burden to the administration, but will instead help to drive and grow an industry that we have a lot of upside in, and can impact lives of many residents that live on this island and in our state in general. So just want to thank everyone for introducing the CD1 version of the bill. And with that, I'll introduce Walea Constantinou to talk about the bill from an industry perspective.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Director Kawano. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Walea Constantinou. I run the Honolulu Film Office here at the city and have for many years. I think I've spent the majority of my life actually promoting this industry and trying to get to the point where we are right now. We're at a very interesting crossroads where we have maxed out on our capacity to grow the industry if we do not invest in infrastructure. And this infrastructure credit is what we need to take it to the next level. We have seen the potential, particularly during COVID, when the industry was able to come here because of how safe we were, that we are on a trajectory to be $1 billion industry. And that means an industry where we're creating real living wage jobs, middle income jobs here in Hawaii, the kind that people can afford to buy a house. So this measure is a critical catalytic bill that will then allow us to go back to the state to then right size the tax credit that needs to be adjusted so that it can accommodate studio work. Right now, the current format of the Hawaii Production Tax Credit, as successful as it is, the thing that has been driving production to the state for over a decade is not designed for work beyond what we do on location because, of course, we really don't have big studios. So this bill is the stepping stone that then allows the industry to go to the legislature to then right-size that credit. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but as you can imagine, strongly support this measure, and thank you for all of your efforts so far.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I don't know who, if Valea, if you would be able to discuss this. Okay, so just for clarification, this is dedication for film studio facilities, as you mentioned, and then in our CD1, there would be 2 separate tax exemptions, yeah? Okay, and then so one for construction and one for operation, yeah? And what is the, what would?
I think Director Kawano can clarify, but my sense is that the bill says we will get property tax from the land value. What's being exempted is the value of the building that is put on that land. And Director can clarify what the revenue source would be for that.
Good morning again. Valia had it right. Yeah, the exemption is per project that's eligible under the bill, and the exemption would cover the improvement costs to build the film studio on the property. So it's not there is opportunity for the city to realize additional real property tax revenue on the land value. Initially, perhaps the unimproved land value, and then later on the improved land value, which will be at a higher valuation. So there's a direct benefit under the CD1 version of Bill 59 to the city and county of Honolulu.
Okay, thank you. And for the land value, let's say if there's a church on it who is exempt from paying the real property tax, then we would then be able to get real property tax. We would then be able to still get real property tax from the building that's on it, yeah? Even though it was exempted before.
That's correct. Okay. So what probably will most likely happen is, you know, an entity like UH West Oahu that has land, let's say 10 to 20 to 30 acres used for the build of a film studio, would essentially lease land to a third-party developer who would do the development and construction. At the time the lease is executed, essentially the land becomes taxable for real property tax purposes. You know, prior to the lease, we don't tax the state of Hawaii, but as a result of the lease, the land would be taxable for real property tax purposes. The bill would then exempt, again, just the improvement part, the improvement component of the facility, and the land component, the land portion would be taxed and would result in direct benefit to the city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know from our last discussions, when we did approve the CD1, we talked about how we were going to work towards the local workforce development, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you. I'm glad to meet with you about that. But are you able to present us with a definition relating to local and local workforce?
I think that's still work in progress, but
Okay,
our thought is, and I'll ask Valia to also chime in because she's very knowledgeable of the film industry here in Hawaii.
Oh, so are we defining it not as I guess not generally as we normally do in ordinance, but we're defining it specifically to film industry, local workforce? Is that where we're trying to lead?
What we're recommending is that we define it in a way that the state defines local workforce. So essentially, an employee that's a resident in the state of Hawaii, they have a tax information release that explains or defines what a residence is. what a resident is. And our thought is that we move along those lines to start so that we're on common grounds. So the tax information release is available online. I can provide it to council members if you'd like to see it. So, in a nutshell, our thought is that an employee that's a resident of the state, as defined by tax information release 97-1. I believe that's the right one.
Okay.
And we can provide a copy of that.
Okay, but that's what you're looking for, because the last time we were looking at different options, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were thinking that being consistent and in alignment with the state with regard to how they do their film credit calculation makes a lot of sense. I'll ask Valea to share some thoughts as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Director. Consistency, I think, is really important because we're talking about one client. Maybe it's a Universal or a Disney or a CBS or whoever it is. We don't want to create a situation where there's one set of definitions at the city and another set of definitions at the state. So we're looking for that consistency as we work to answer and come to what the definition is.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we have questions by Councilmember Say, Councilmember Tupola, followed by Council Chair, Committee Vice Chair Wire, and then Council Chair Waters. Okay.
Mr. Kawano, would it be possible to have a trigger mechanism in the measure to have this particular ordinance take effect upon approval by the state legislature for a GET exemption on all construction materials and labor?
I believe that would be possible.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's it? Okay. Okay, with that, we have Councilmember Tupola, followed by Committee Vice Chair Wire.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Director Quano and Valea, for being here. A quick question about the eligible film studio requirements, and I know the CD actually added a few more. Just trying to keep things simple, because, for real property tax, you guys typically do exemptions with straight up documents like age, income, whatnot. And so to have things written in such as promoting local workforce, establishing public tours, which in my perspective is kind of outside of what real property tax division should do. I mean, I feel like that's a DBET function. Somebody that's counting jobs, counting workforces, counting internships. What is your thoughts on that? Because I still think either way, right? You build a studio, you're going to need a workforce. It's going to start developing it. I do like the reports that the state puts out, DBET puts out. Valea and Georgia work very well together on that. Is that something that, because it's written into the law, that your division then would have to somehow collect as a verification for this? I just want to make this as easy as possible. Just to be clear, I'm in support. So.
Oh, thank you. I think we have Ms. Skinner set
is she on?
to testify on the Zoom. So there she is.
We can also call upon her to provide responses too after you respond.
Yeah. So I don't disagree, Council Member, that I appreciate a very clean approach to the measure, but I leave it to the council once they hear what Ms. Skinner's comments are.
Okay. Okay, with that, with Councilmember Tupola's question, I would like to call on Ms. Skinner to respond as well as be unmuted. I just want to allow time to do the unmuting. Okay, perfect. She's unmuted. Great. Happy.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair Cordero, and all members of the council. And thank you, Valea and Andrew, for your very succinct and important testimony in support of this measure. Georgia Skinner, Head of Creative Industries Division for DBED, and here also on behalf of our Director, Jimmy Tokioka. Workforce development is a critical part of what has been included in the CD1, and we agree wholeheartedly that while we are already tracking a lot of this data, and Creative Industries and DBED are the leads for new job development in the Good Jobs Hawaii and Good Jobs Oahu grants, it's really important that we work hand in hand. We have a lot of metrics already established, and I think it will help to streamline and simplify how we report back on this very important measure.
Yeah, that'd be great because I know you guys do so much of the tracking already. I don't want to create additional work. I want the Real Property Tax Division to have a very clear way that they get the information and they're able to do the exemptions. My last question is, one of the requirements is with the whole city logo. I know I've talked to yourself and Valet about this. If our intention is that all of these facilities turn around and benefit, the city or our income or anything that we're doing, I do feel like not a lot of people know what the city logo is. So I feel like the preference that I would have, especially since a huge one is going to be built right now in UH West Oahu, and we really want it to succeed, is have the address or have something that will attract people to use that facility again. And again, everything in a movie is just like that, so no one's going to really see it very much. But because we're writing it into the law, I mean, what would be more effective?
I think that with the logo notwithstanding, there's probably other considerations as we move to engaging a private sector partner to build these facilities. So perhaps there is another way to ensure that both the city and county of Honolulu, that imagery as well as other areas of value propositions that can be leveraged, not just the logo, but in other means. So I think that does take a little bit more discussion. Perhaps it's something that is not as necessary as we think to be put in a law, but something that is a caveat through, in our world, going through the Hawaii administrative rules process or another rules process that once this becomes law, we can work on together.
Yeah, that'd be great, because we're not a company where we want people to come and shop here. And what we want is we want all of these studios to succeed. We want, if they like the movie or the production, we want them to go back and use the studio again. We want them to use the soundstage again. So thank you, Chair, for the time.
Thank you. Councilmember Dupola, I do want to note that you did in the last committee, and you can look at it in minutes, or there were a good amount of discussions, and I really like what you said about the quantifying or possibly requirements on how we can, I guess, meet the qualifications for these exemptions or credits. So that is something that I don't know how we could qualitate that. I don't know the best word for it.
Quantitate, yeah.
Quantitate.
Like with the numbers. I guess to follow up, Chair, that's what I'm saying. And I'm so sorry I didn't have like edits ready for today's hearing, but I do think that I want us to be more succinct because it says that we need them to turn in something that shows they're promoting local workforce. That's very vague. Let's just keep it clear, like maybe turn in a DBET report or whatever it is, because they're tracking this already. You guys are tracking it. Sorry, one more question, follow up for you, Valea. In regards to what Councilmember Say said, isn't it that you guys are going back to increase the tax credit and not anything with construction? Or what is the thing that you guys are pursuing on the state side?
So one of the things that we need to do to actually facilitate production being able to go into the studio is to make room in the existing credit. For example, a large film like a Marvel film, our credit limits the on-island spend to about $75 million, but the entire budget of a film like that is often 125, 150, north almost $200 million. So what we've done with our basic credit that we have now is we've driven a lot of work that is on location work, but there's not enough room in that credit if someone wanted to stay and be in a studio, if we had a studio, that they could claim a tax credit on the additional time here. So we would need to right-size that credit.
I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, so
when you kept saying right size, I didn't understand. Now I understand. There's this threshold, and once you've reached it, then that's how much you can claim for the credit. You guys are asking that that threshold be expanded, so if you expend more money, that you can still get a write-off for that, and that's on the state side.
That would be on the state side, and areas like New Mexico and other places, when you do work in a proper facility, they exempt that production value from the overall industry cap. So these are all discussions that we're having as an industry and things that we need to go talk to the state about. But you can imagine that if you're a large corporate entity and you have a choice to do a project in Hawaii and claim a credit on $75 million of the $150 million budget, or you can go to a place where you can claim the entire movie, 150 million on your credit. You're going to look at that bottom line, and you're going to either shift your work, which is what happens now. All the stage work that would normally happen here gets split. They do the on-location work in Hawaii. They do the stage work in Louisiana or Atlanta.
Oh yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Aquaman 2, they filmed like 2 scenes. One was like at Cockroach Cove and Hawaii Kai, and another one, and then the rest was other places.
Right. And when you don't have enough room in the credit, you don't give them the opportunity to come here and work. And if you have a facility, that then does not open the doors for them to come in and work in that facility. So there's a little bit of work to be done on the state side to tweak that credit so that it works now that we are in the phase of talking about studio development. And that's a significant ask that we're going to have to make for the state. And I think Georgia may have some comment about that when her testimony
Well, I don't need any more clarification. I appreciate it. I just don't want to hinge this on anything on the state, seeing as though we don't move any of those pieces. We don't know how long that's going to take. And to date, the state has already done and is doing things for this, whereas we're kind of stepping into this for the first time, trying to do something for this industry. So my preference would not be to tie it to anything they do, seeing as though we have no control over that, but rather just see what we do have control over and make sure that this is clearly a city benefit, since it's going to be a city credit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I know that we mentioned, before I move on, I want to ensure that we talk about, because there's credits that was first in the original bill, and then 2 exemptions for construction and operation. And if we could have Director Kawano talk about the differences between the credit and the exemption. Does it come before, after, all that kind?
Yeah, Budget Chair, the difference between an exemption versus a credit is essentially timing. From a taxpayer standpoint, it's much easier to work with an exemption because it's a direct reduction of what's invoiced, and billed in terms of property taxes due. The credit would require that the full tax would get billed, taxpayer would make payment on the bill, and then apply for credit.
Thank you.
Typically, that's what happens. And the credit usually happens the following year in most cases.
Right, thank you. I meant to ask that in the beginning so we could talk about the right things, but thank you. Okay, with that, we have Committee Vice Chair Wire, followed by Council Chair Waters.
Thank you, Chair. And Director, just had a couple clarifying questions, because I do support the intent and overall purpose of the bill and appreciate the introducer and putting it forward. I'm just curious, so we're looking at qualified production and the cost to construct or develop. Are we saying that qualified production would include folks that do acquisitions of land, or are we looking at and interpreting develop pretty narrowly to be the actual construction, similar to the initial exemption for construction time?
I think in the base case, the land actually exists, under the state. But it could, if a private developer came in and acquired land for development, it could encompass, additional costs, including acquisition. But we're thinking that based on what's already available, it'll probably be a situation where state land is used.
Okay.
So I don't think acquisition comes into play, but the valuation will, the assessment will. So yeah, that's
no, I
where we
appreciate
think
that.
we're going to start off.
No, that's helpful, because I guess I would want to ask if you would see any harm from further narrowing, I guess, the scope to be situations where there's like a long-term lease in the example of the base case. And I only ask because, for example, if we're interpreting it broadly, and then say someone came in and bought Word Warehouse or Word Center and then converted that into a film studio, and then maybe, would they qualify under this bill to get a 20-year or whatever it is tax exemption on that? That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Yeah, good question, Council Member. In terms of harm of narrowing the scope non-tax lands. Yeah, I think that's where you're getting to.
Yeah.
I don't see any harm, but I actually don't see any harm if we keep it open because, let's say just hypothetically, Amazon, they're in the film industry right now, and if they decide to acquire land to build a studio, that would be land that's already taxed. They acquire the land from a third party, local person perhaps, or could be even mainland, U.S. mainland or international owner. Yeah, it could have an impact, but we're thinking that the likelihood overall is very, very low. The probability of that happening is lower because going back to that hypothetical, if Amazon wanted to acquire land to build a studio, they probably would have done it by now. So, yeah, and they've acquired land, we know, big time for their distribution and their business of selling goods, distributing goods at wholesale and retail here in Hawaii. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll ask Valea if she has any thoughts or comments as well.
I would welcome that as well.
So the general economics, normally you wouldn't have a landowner that has a piece of property in its highest and best use. The reality is that a filming facility and a sound stage, there are a series of large empty boxes in a large format. So it's generally not the highest and best use. In places all across the country and even around the world, what tends to move these things forward is a cooperation of the government by giving land and some kind of incentive to build it. Because what you want is the economic activity. And in a place like Hawaii, where the cost of land kind of skews what the value of all that is, it's really the only way that you can make it happen is to have cooperation of the government to do it.
Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. I'm glad that you brought that up because that would be relating to the actual construction part, right? And then there's also exemptions for the operations of the actual studio. So, okay. With that, we have Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. Hey, just to follow up what Councilmember Wire was talking about, and currently we do have film studios in Diamond Head. Is that correct? I know you're talking about typically it's not land that's in town, but well, we do have facilities in town. Diamond Head, right?
The Diamond Head facility is actually the only state-owned soundstage in the country.
And what's in Kaka'ako now? Is that dealing with the film industry?
So the city was able to take over HCDA land, and HCDA was in the process of working with someone in the film industry to turn the old Look Lab warehouse into a workable facility. Again, the reason that facility works is because it's city-owned land that an RFP was put out for at below what the highest and best use value is. And that is one empty building. It's not a studio complex. Remember, we're talking about building almost like a mini city. It's over at least a minimum of 10 acres in the bill, but some of the current proposals out there go to 34 acres. In the past, we've had to sort of patch together what the needs of the industry are. And it's usually parking for 400, a space where you can build a large sets that's high span, large square footage, high cube ceiling, offices for what's around there, a mill, and storage, set dressing, wardrobe, crafts. So you begin to see it becomes a whole city complex. And so when we're talking about what this bill will do, this bill, because of the minimums that are set, the $100 million the $100 million investment and the size of the property, we're talking about a significant facility that's going to put hundreds of people to work, multiple productions at the same time. It's not setting aside one sort of remnant building and bodging everything else around it.
Where do you anticipate this building being built? I guess to follow up on what Councilmember Wire was saying, we don't want to take valuable land that we could otherwise generate revenue for the city, and and now we would lose that, versus land that's not used somewhere else on the island that we wouldn't be using anyway. So is there an idea? Is it going to be in Councilmember Tolba's district, Councilmember Tupola's district, or in my district, or Esther Kiaina's district? Where is this contemplated going?
Well, I can tell you that there is a RFP out by the university right now attached to UH West Oahu. That is an active play, and I think the market factors decide where it is. I don't think we decide where it is, and it's a combination of what is the value of the land, what are the incentives that apply to that land, how much space is around it, what else can be facilitated around it. So it's not like someone is going to go to a ward center and raise a bunch of shopping malls to be able to build it, because the economics don't make sense. You actually make more money with the shopping malls. That's why the partnership between the government and the film industry is so important, because it facilitates that economic development in an area which otherwise the numbers are so skewed because of our land value that it doesn't work.
Understand what you're saying. At the same time, we do have a housing shortage, right? We need land for housing. That's why I'm just real curious where, other than UH, where this is being contemplated.
If I could
The other
add,
thing that
Councilmember-
might be helpful, this is still early in the process, that if it comes back between second and third reading, that perhaps show us what it looks like in other cities that have done this. Might be helpful just to see exactly what we're talking about. But I got a question, another question. So earlier you talked about that state tax credit currently being available for production only. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Did I hear you correctly?
The Hawaii Production Tax Credit is available to incoming productions.
And forgive me for being naive, but when we're talking about production, we're talking about the filming and the on-site filming. We're not talking about the editing, which is what this incentive in Bill 59 is talking about. You're talking about like an editing studio, not production studio, right? Because didn't we build a production studio already on the university?
So the studio facility is actually an educational facility, and part of what the UH West Oahu value proposition is, and I know Mr. Chris Lee is in the audience and can speak to this, is the proximity of those two things is the accelerator for the growth and the job development and all of those pieces.
I guess what I'm getting at is that the state tax credit currently available is not available for what we're talking about today in
Correct.
Bill 59. Okay, so it's completely separate.
It's completely separate.
Have you or your counterpart in DBED talked to the legislature about including the, and what are we talking about here? Let's just name it, relating to incentives for a film studio facility. Is there something more descriptive? Because film studio facility seems very general. It's a general term, but
So it's
let's be specific
infrastructure-
about what we're talking about.
Infrastructure development for the industry, and there have been previous bills at the legislature, and I believe Ms. Skinner can talk about some considerations for future infrastructure development bills. But again, Bill 59 is very unique and very specific from the city's perspective, because that forgiveness of property tax, and as Director Kawano had mentioned, with really very little risk to the city, the engineering of what this bill is actually quite smart, because instead of putting a huge upfront cost that would be a CIP cost that would add to the city's debt ceiling, which is normally what you do when you do these kinds of things, you're amortizing it year over year over the 20 years, reducing the city's risk. In the meantime, getting the property tax value from the land, and there's also TAT that comes in, because the film industry uses hotels quite a bit. So you have two
with all due
sources of
respect, you're
income
not
to
listening
offset
to my
that.
question. I'm just trying to narrow it down. We're talking about two separate things. right? We're talking about building a film studio facility that does the editing work, the work that is not currently done in Hawaii, right?
The
That's
studio
what Bill
facility-
59 is targeted to do.
Correct. It is to-
separate and aside what the state tax credit for production is, right? It's two separate things. This
Yes.
will not be used to build a production type studio.
So the physical production is what the state incentivizes, but the place to do the physical production is what Bill 59 is incentivizing.
Okay, understood. One of the things that my colleague talked about was having the state also put some skin in the game with regard to this film studio facility by way of an exemption of the GE tax for construction costs. That certainly would also help incentivize someone to come, like Universal Studios and others, Amazon, to come and build a film studio facility under Bill 59, right?
I'm not sure if the construction cost would apply to the productions like Universal and such. It might to the studio developer, but I'm not sure if this bill being contingent upon that is really something that is going to then allow the developer to get the financing they need, because if there's a contingency, then they need to wait for that contingency to be enacted.
Good point. So, are you and or the administration currently pursuing a bill in the legislature that would provide a exemption from the general excise tax on construction costs?
This bill, as I started with, is the catalyst to be able to start all those conversations.
So that's not my question. Are you or the administration currently pursuing a bill, or perhaps talk to the governor, who seems to be supportive of the waiver of the general excise tax for construction? So my question is there a bill currently drafted, ready to go, and for introduction at the legislature?
I can tell you that discussions are ongoing. I don't know if the bill is complete.
Okay, so you are contemplating this.
We know that, as you said, it would provide a benefit, but in reality, the balance is, do we ask for the GET exemption with it, and do we ask for what we need to make sure that the credit is appropriate to attract, and how do all those numbers come into play? So there's a lot of discussion going on. No one is against discussing it, but there's nothing that is set in stone right now.
Okay. I don't know if you can answer this question, or Director Kawano, or the DBED person who looks like she has her hand up.
Yes, I think
But
she can probably
the question
share.
is, can the governor on his own waive the GET and construction costs, or does it have to be approved by the legislature?
Would you be all right if Georgia tried to
Yeah,
answer
of
that
course.
question?
Okay,
I'm assuming the chair.
per Council Chair Waters' question, we will allow for DBED's Ms. Georgia Skinner to respond.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair Waters, for the question, and thank you, Valea, for summarizing and including a lot of these aspects. First of all, I think in answer to your first question, or most recent question, Chair Waters, the governor can't do it solely. It would have to be moved through the legislature in a vehicle. And Valea is absolutely right. We as a department have been looking at ways to improve the current tax credit for film and television. And as part of that, exploring how we might float something this session that would be comprehensive and also align with what the city is doing in terms of infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Can I clarify one other thing, please? The current film tax credit is inclusive of digital media, film production, and when we say film production, it's either in a studio facility that exists now, which we don't have enough of, which is why we keep hitting our head on the $400 million spend ceiling that productions bring to our state every year. But it does include post-production. It's just that we need to move that industry forward, which is why a purpose-built facility with the ability to do post-production here on island is so important.
Just as a follow-up, do you know if that bill is in the governor's package?
We are awaiting to hear that at this moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, there's really great questions on this. I do know that we have a lot of testifiers, and we can go back into discussion after this, but I would like to go to testifiers next up with, online testifiers first. I'm going to go in the order that I have and then ask for any further testifiers, okay? With us first up is Michael Shibata, followed by Marisha Palma Elmore, followed by Angela Young. Okay, so first up is Michael Shibata.
Chair, testifier is not logged on.
Oh, sorry. We'll take you up. Okay. We'll call you up later. We'll call you up when we have in person. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, but I will be testifying on behalf of the university and Mike Shibata. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we have Marisha Palmer Elmore online.
Chair, testifier is not logged on.
Not logged on? Okay, next up we have Angela Young. And then followed by Georgia Skinner, followed by, and I'm sorry if this is wrong, Vitaly Frolov. So next up, Angela Young, followed by Ms. Skinner.
Aloha, Chair, and Happy New Year. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES. And according to the Honolulu Film Office, from the county, the film industry respects and appreciates our island, allowing economic development without harmful physical development. And so there are a lot of side conversations going on in this deliberation about the filmmaking industry. At the Senate Ways and Means Committee, January 2nd, the Economic Outlook presentation from Dr. Eugene Tian from DPED labels film as an emerging sector. And the Ways and Means asked a lot of questions about how to justify why filmmaking should get support and an appropriation of funds. January 3rd, the budget presentation from DPED highlighted even more details about the filmmaking industry for government to consider investing and enhancing, maximizing the film and creative industries. And the education chair asked what is the plan for high school students if they get to a college and they get to a cliff with nowhere to go. And it's because they haven't built film studios. And many of the students are not going to school after high school. But in music and film, you don't have to go to school to become a talented artist, but you do need film facilities for local artists to do film, to record music, produce songs, post-edit films. And from a technical standpoint, as someone who is actually from the creative industry sector, it makes more sense to build film and music studios together.
Thank you, Angela. May I have you conclude?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have Ms. Skinner, followed by Vitaly Frolov, followed by Irish Barber. Okay, Ms. Skinner?
Thank you so much. I'll be brief. Again, on behalf of Jimmy Tokioka, our director from DBEN, we solidly support CD1 and hope we can pass this measure out this council session. It's critical along with what we're doing at the state. We work collaboratively with all of our film offices. And one thing that is important to note is that within Section E, number 1, and other areas within this proposal, we just want to point out that when you do look for the incentive within this CD1 to be working with workforce development, please include the state in that collaboration along with DLIR and our university system. We have gotten a long way down the road and really stitching together the what we call curriculum to career pathway and strategy. This vehicle, along with what we do at the state, this legislative session will guarantee that we have more studio facilities and more productions, therefore more jobs, and the stable tax credit to drive it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Skinner, I do have a question for you relating to the state exemptions that the film industry or studios receive. Are they, if you could just share a little bit about it, because, you know, we are talking about the city exemptions here, but if you could just clarify what the state exemptions are.
Yeah, actually, our film tax credit is a credit program. So, as Director Kawano mentioned earlier, they have to expend the money in order to get the credit back on their return. So, the credit, as it stands now, is 22% back on your qualified spend for anything on Oahu and 27% on any neighbor island. You have qualifiers for all of this that are very, very drilled down, important to track. There's a per project cap of 17 million. And Valea mentioned earlier, and this is done in other states, when we have a purpose-built facility, to add an additional percentage onto that if you are using a purpose-built facility in the state, thereby making it more attractive to keep production here longer. Production encompasses location production and in studio, as I mentioned before. We also have the cap currently at 50 million for the year. So that is something that is important to the state plan, but also we need to raise it in order to drive the entire industry forward. So in a nutshell, there are also workforce development requirements. Those workforce development requirements, including 0.2% going into a film fund to be able to fund local production, is how we are building a sustainable local film industry, in addition to inviting those offshore to do more production here.
Thank you. And just for clarification, it's 0.2 going into film fund?
Yeah, it's the Hawaii, it's Act 193, SLH 2022, and that is based on their rebate. So 0.2% of their rebate goes into the fund in addition to any of our state DBED facilities that we rent out or lease out for production, with the exception of the Diamond Head facility. So we do have a facility in Leeward, of course, at the Kalaeloa facility, which is about 75,000 square feet of stage space, but definitely not a purpose-built facility.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And, you know, we were talking about quantifiable requirements is for our exemption, and I stand corrected. I would like to correct myself, stating that it was exemption. It's a state film credit, excuse me.
No problem.
And it's good to see that even with the maximum of 50 million that you said you are looking to increase, that there is that 0.2% going to the Hawaii State Film Fund. And with that, to assist us, of course, there was really great discussions on how we can best implement our exemptions. So we look forward to that discussion. But is there any language, whether it be in that act or any other act, that could assist us with such quantifiable, I guess, requirements that we can issue out into our bill or our ordinance, I should say?
I think that there is something to be said for that collaborative aspect. Certainly, you heard mention of the TIR earlier that does relate to exemptions. I think it's important that we do that. And to Member Say's comment earlier, we do agree that both the state and the city and county and all our counties need to work more closely to integrate these things. So we'll be happy to meet with the introducers of the bill and our Honolulu Film Office and other members of the administration, including the mayor, to align those things, particularly in how do you certify, which is what we do for the film tax credit. How do you certify that the person who is building this facility is actually training the people and they're getting jobs? Because that involves labor unions, other guilds, and the production entity and whoever owns that production entity itself. It is not simply on the person who is built or managing the facility.
And in what form, Ms. Skinner, do you receive that information? I know that Councilmember Tupola brought up a report to DBED. Is that received in that form?
Yes, we're happy to transmit any of our multiple acts because there's been so many adjustments to the tax credit. So we'll go ahead and transmit that in addition to the emerging industries report that was mentioned earlier. Creative industries and film in particular will help us diversify our economy, still supporting tourism, but there's an added benefit to having more film production, more jobs, particularly in the Leeward Coast area.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Skinner. I would also like to welcome Councilmember Okimoto. I got really giddy because we have a full council, so it feels kind of cool. Okay, any other questions for Ms. Skinner? Okay, all right, moving forward. We have Vitaly Prolov online, followed by Irish Barber, followed by Jordan Candell.
Chair, testifier is not logged on.
Okay, thank you. Irish Barber. We'll call you up during. Oh yeah, we'll call you up during what's it called, in person. Okay, one moment. Okay, next up, Jordan Candell.
Chair, testifier is not logged on.
Oh, okay, in person. Okay, how about Aaron? Oh, okay, you can represent yourself. Okay, all right. With that, is there anyone online who wishes to testify? If you're on the phone, please press *9 to indicate to raise your hand, and then when I call your number, you will then press *6 to unmute yourself. Is there anyone else? Okay, all right, moving forward, we are moving on to in-person testifiers. Okay, we'll go with Jordan Candell.
Aloha. I'll represent my twin brother, Aaron, as well, but only one of us could make it. Thanks for having us. I'll play me off with music if I go too long. I am here to simply share my experience as a born, raised, and still based professional screenwriter and producer who has no personal investment or skin in this game or political savvy other than running and losing class president at Iolani in 8th grade. So I don't know how all of this works. I so appreciate all the questions, concerns, all the work that the film commissioners and DBED are doing to raise the film industry in multiple ways and levels that I'm hearing, like this advanced chessboard. Let me just be here to try to simplify it towards questions I've heard some council members ask about if you build it, they will come. Let me frame it that way. I've had 4 projects I've tried to steer this way, both personal and other ones from friends, producers in the industry, that haven't come because we don't have the facilities to support them. The Diamond Head stage is seen as a very small one, and very limited. So you have to build the facilities to engender more people to come and meet, we're just hitting that bottleneck here. The tax incentives, that's a separate issue that needs to be addressed and the right sizing in that language to meet that. I don't know if it should fit into this thing, but to build a stage we had $200 million plus productions that wanted to film here last year in 2023, Chief of War and live action Moana, and have announced and left. They're shooting exteriors and going somewhere else. That is industry and jobs that can come here, and not just in the film industry, but all the services that support it. So something like this will be a huge diversification for the economy and many ripple impacts that experts can speak to more than I. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have Irish Barber.
Haoli makahiki ho kako. My name's Irish Barber. I'm the business representative for IATSC Local 665. IATSC is the largest entertainment union in the world. We represent the Hawaii chapter, which is about 800 members and about 700 trainees. I'm lucky to have been in the industry long enough to have seen the before studio and before tax credit. They would come here and shoot exteriors and then disappear. So it's very difficult to have a viable full-time job was impossible. You worked little shows here and there, commercials, music videos. Since the implementation of the tax credit, we have seen long TV series, which is as close to full-time employment as you'll get for our industry. Our industry is very sporadic. We're not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We work outdoors, on the beaches, on the ocean, in the jungles, in the rain, sunset to sunrise. So having these interior spaces makes them stay here longer. And the way we know that for sure is there was a large major studio that built an exterior Disneyland on the island of Kauai, and then packed up everything and went to Atlanta and shot indoors for 5 months. As Jordan mentioned, we saw Chief of War, move 5 months of work to the stages of Aotearoa. So I'm here to say that the film industry, please, I'm so grateful that the city council has seen value in our industry to put forth this measure. We're a diverse industry. We're highly technical, highly artistic, highly paid, green industry, and I really appreciate being able to testify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to testify not on this list? Okay, Chris, sorry, Chris. Okay.
Mahalo, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for hearing this bill again.
I know your name, but can you state your name for the
Yes,
record?
my name is Chris Lee, founder and director of the Academy for Creative Media, also a film and television producer. Very grateful to be here today. Just to briefly go back to Chair Waters, we're talking about a studio complex. And within that, yes, there will be editing, but there's also production. There's production of a size and scope that we cannot accommodate. They recently mentioned the Chief of War, Moana, which of course is shooting here locally, but then they're going to do everything else in Atlanta. Midway, shot here at Cavella Bay, a little bit of Pearl Harbor, then they went back to Montreal, where they rebuilt Pearl Harbor and the rest of the islands because they didn't have stages here. So the only way to grow this business, which is the fastest and largest part of the diversification of our economy, according to the GDP reports from DBET, is to build infrastructure. We have the human capital, which is our students, which over the last 20 years, and if you'll permit me, I have a booklet here celebrating the first 20 years of ACM. We have a robust credit, but does need to be improved to accommodate this. But in order to get to that $1 billion a year business, we must have the physical infrastructure. And that is something that Diamond Head is one stage. We're talking about initially 80,000 square feet as opposed to 16,000 square feet of stage space to begin with. But also at the University of Hawaii, mixed use side of the property, which is 34 acres, which is really, think of it as an actual back lot that works. People actually work there, but you actually can shoot there. And so you build it in that way. If any of you have been to the Grove in Los Angeles, that is a regular shooting location for various television shows. Anyway, so it's a different thing from what we have at Diamond Head, what we're doing, what the state is doing at Kalailoa, where they use the old Air Force hangars. But it is something essential if you, as I think many of you do here, do believe that this is an important part of diversifying Hawaii's economy and creating jobs for our students. And if you allow me, I'll give these booklets out.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That would be good. If you could, we have our city clerks here. If you could please provide that. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate that. And also, do you have that in your testimony too, or no?
I'm also testifying on behalf of...
Oh, no, I mean, do you have that booklet with the testimony? Or no, not yet?
Oh, I was just published during the holiday, and we'll be creating a flip book, and so there will be a digital version as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. With that, is there anyone else in person who wishes to testify, sir? Please state your name for the record when you come up to the podium. Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Min with Min Plastics. I wasn't planning to do this, but we do support the film industry afar, and I would say that the projects that the film industry has brought into our facility has been some of the most fun and exciting and challenging opportunities that we had to work on. And to support beyond just legislation, there are a lot of training and skills necessary for the support of the film industry. So just my impact and my come from on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We really appreciate you for chiming in. I know that you weren't planning to, as you mentioned, but thank you. Okay, members, we're back in discussion. Any discussion? Okay, Council Vice Chair Kia Aina.
Thank you, Chair. I am pleased that we are having this discussion and moving this measure forward. Thank you, Councilmember Tolba. Thank you to the industry. as well as the state and city film offices. You know, in our discussions, this bill is a reintroduction of another bill, so the dialogue has been here. And so I am pleased that the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services has, in its amendments, addressed a lot of the concerns that have been raised. And so I look forward to this measure moving through this process. So I just want to make clear to everyone, it's not that the City Council was not supportive of the thought. I think when you're giving tax incentives like this, we need to make sure that there is no adverse financial implication for our city budget, and that the potential benefits, financial benefits, far outweigh the costs to the city. And so with regard to economic diversity, of course, with regard to long-term. And so I'm pleased not just to, because this could be a game changer, I'm pleased not only for the industry, but of course for the workforce development component of this. With regard to Ms. Skinner, I know Chair Waters had asked you about whether what you are dealing with at the state level is part of the governor's package. Whether it is or not, it is so important, similar to the navigation through the city council, that you work with the leadership of the legislature, both their finance committees as well as the authorizing committees, to see if you have any members that are willing to move this project regardless of whether or not it gets in the governor's package, because I don't think that you should be waiting. I think that once this bill moves forward, you want all of the elements in place to kickstart this industry with the full support of the city and the state. So that's all I wanted to say, Chair, and thank you for allowing this measure to be heard today so that it can move forward, hopefully for second reading and final passage.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Okay, Councilmember Toba.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for putting this bill on the agenda, and I echo everything that Councilmember Kiana has said. We all know that this is a win-win bill, definitely a game changer. So I just wanted to say thank you. Hopefully we can move this on to third reading and get this thing going. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, I think we had a really great discussion as we've had for the past few years, but also especially in this past committee. I think this committee really highlighted a lot of things. It seemed like there were discussions with administration and members of the council that did bring up ideas, but also ways to further assist the industry. So I tried my best because there were different questions popping up, but of course we talked about one major thing that I think me and Councilmember Tupola agree upon was working out the quantifying the qualifications for the exemptions for both, and then talking about the definition for local workforce, which is of course something we talked about, which will need to be added to the CD2, and then also taking a look at firming up the further exemptions relating to the general excise tax as well, which was really discussed heavily. And so I look forward to implementing that when it does come back to committee for a CD2. So please know that I've heard everybody, I've written it down, and hopefully I kind of summed that up, as we do already have the CD1 that was adopted from Councilmember Toba last time. And then I'll work to further amend it on the approved CD1. Okay? With that, any other discussion? Okay. Oh, wait, did I miss something? No. Okay, hang on. Flip the page, excuse me. The chair recommends that Bill 59, 2023, CD1, be reported out for second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, moving forward. Is this the last item? The last item on the agenda. Thank you, members, for your patience. I really appreciate it. Okay, Bill 40, Bill 40, 2023, which establishes the additional requirements for the Transit Construction Mitigation Fund. Members, we have a proposed posted CD1 OCS 2023-1083/12/14/2023 at 1:46 p.m., submitted by Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. For your information, the amendments are listed on the agenda as well. With that, I would also like to kick it over to the co-introducer, our colleague, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, for further verbal amendments.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to request that Bill 40 of 2023 be amended to the version that I submitted and is listed on the agenda, but with further amendments, specifically the first being to amend Section 6-55.4 of the bill to amend the first sentence to read as follows. Expenditures from the Transit Construction Mitigation Fund may only be used to mitigate negative economic impacts on businesses from the rail project, provided that 1, expenditures may not be used to mitigate beyond impacts from construction of the rail project, and 2, expenditures per eligible business may not exceed $10,000 per fiscal year, and to delete subsection 3. And then the second amendment is to amend section 6-55.6 to add a new subsection D that reads as follows, quote, up to 25% of the monies deposited into the Transit Construction Mitigation Fund may be used to administer this article. These two amendments are to help to ensure equity so businesses don't have significant disparities between the amount of monies that they can receive. And it also eases the administrative burden on the departments by allowing them to use some of these funds to administer the application of the fund.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, for sharing the amendments, further verbal amendments, and also explaining the need for those further amendments. With that, it is a council-sponsored bill, both by the budget chair and Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, but from the city administration, we have Director Kawano.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, for the record. With regard to Bill 40, which has passed second reading, the administration is still concerned about the bill, although it has been made very much more focused, in terms of ensuring the benefit to smaller businesses with fewer employees, and a fixed amount of benefit up to a maximum of $10,000. I believe the loan provision is removed as well. And I can see that it's very much more fine-tuned, but we're still a little concerned with regard to impacts that can happen going forward with regard to the continuation of rail construction and the exposure to the city of having to pay out additional grants to businesses that allege that they're harmed. And I think the tough part for us is where do you draw the line for a business that says it has been harmed when you just don't know if the harm occurred due to the business's own mismanagement and poor decision-making, versus being directly impacted by rail construction. I think that's going to be something challenging for us to determine. It's going to probably require a lot of work on our part to ensure that, we get it down right. I think that's the main concern. So with everything just stated, our position is that we cannot support the bill. And I'm ready to take questions.
Even with a more focused approach and with the quantifiable amount of employees and access to the active construction sites or corridors and all of that.
What it gets down to is, where is it going to stop? Because once we approve something like this, whenever the city is involved in any kind of construction, throughout the island, there could be a request or claim for similar legislation going forward.
we can say state as active new guideway or I don't know what the HR wait what the term is HRTP rail guideway construction. We can be as specific as that. As opposed to continued active construction on the already erected guideways.
I just don't have any more comment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Councilmember Dos Santos Tam.
Thank you, Chair, for having this hearing, and thanks, Director, for being here. I guess, with the department's position that it can't support this bill, does the department or the administration have any other suggestions for how we can help these businesses? We saw what happened in Aiea and Waipahu. We know the rail construction is going to be coming down Dillingham for years. We know that we're going to end up in Kaka'ako and hopefully further. And these businesses have been suffering. What would the department say, or perhaps the mayor say, to these businesses? If not this bill, then what else?
Council member, I don't know what the mayor would say. I really don't. All I can say is that, we've taken a stance over the years as rail construction has progressed. And I think if the concern is, the impact to a business with regard to rail construction, I just think that we're going to have to determine with a little more objectivity as to how do you determine that? How do you assess a business was actually harmed by the construction itself versus other factors, other variables? Where do we draw the line? Because if we don't clearly define how the assessment is done and done in a manner that's objective, essentially we're, anyone that submits an application, following rules that BFS, Budget and Fiscal Services, provides, if the criteria are not clear enough, objective enough, anyone submitting an application probably would be subject to receive grant monies if they can show that their financial status was impacted. And it's, again, the difficult part is to isolate what caused a business's harm when there's just so many factors that can impact it.
Right, and I understand, we talked about in the last bill, like different quantifiable things, and I definitely understand the concerns relating to determining this program or bill requests quantifiable requirements as well. But if we're looking for a prescription, of course, we're not asking for HART to do any of the funding part, but there are contracts that do start and have different start dates with their contractors or consultants and contractors, which we can utilize as start dates for in and around the new guideway active construction, possibly. Would that be a possibility for prescription?
It's difficult. So you're a business owner. I'm just talking hypothetically. You know that there's rail construction going on. Let's say you operate a retail business.
Yes.
So it's pretty basic. You get sweetheart rent, very favorable rent from a landlord on the corridor. You decide to give it a shot. It doesn't work. Things don't work out. Should the city have to pay up to $10,000 in that case when, the business owner, the proprietor, entrepreneur decided to open business on the corridor because of favorable rent? That's a scenario that can play out, and, we've seen it happen. I think all of us have. And then
I think
is it the right thing to do? Because at the end of the day, the general public, right, through real property taxes, are paying out these grants. Would be paying out these grants if we adopt this legislation? And is it equitable? Is it fair?
And
That's the part I can't get over.
I understand.
Yeah.
And I guess with that, I would like to, I guess, prescribe further. If we were to request, like, let's say construction started in December of 2023. That's just for example, yeah. December 2023, but I opened in September. And let's say our prescription for qualification is to show a year's amount in either sale or GE reduction of income or, yeah, just sales. And so I get that, but I think there's different prescriptions that could be quantifiable if we do prescribe it in the bill or through the program if this bill is passed. Okay, I understand.
It's the bottom line is that rail has been moving along for years, right? Not just a year. It's been moving forward for years right now. And we know what the pathway is, right? We know where we're headed, Civic Center. Is it the right thing to do with regard to spending taxpayer monies? You know,
so with the I guess focused approach, and I thank you for noting that, it does really gear towards our really small businesses that really need to make it work, especially along the corridor and future corridor as well, right? And of course, we can say, oh, sorry, you can't operate here, but we hope you come back later so you can provide be here for TOD purposes. But we know that's never going to be guaranteed. Looking backwards. So I don't know. Sorry, members, any other questions? Councilmember Tupola.
Thanks so much, Chair. Yeah, not to get into this since it's not my district, but we all drive Dillingham, so it's pretty severe. And I'm quite surprised actually that the administration's position is to not support, because I think, the bill that was passed in 2018, which was not during many of our times, it was intended to help businesses. And this bill that we're discussing today is just the mechanism whereby to distribute it. And in 2019, the HART board put $250,000 into its budget to help businesses. So I think the question to the public is, if this has been discussed in 2018, if HART put money in, if the council in 2018 put $2 million into the budget for this, where is the money that they can access, right? So that's why this bill was made. This is a mechanism or a guideline whereby the money can be accessed. So I think actually because there was already this gesture towards it, that's the tough part, right? Is that businesses all this time from 2018 to 2023 have been waiting for the city to parse out how they will use the money, but they were told, and again, I'm reading this news article because monies were put aside for this specific purpose, and it even stated here that the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority Business Interruption Fund could be a potential model, right? They allocated $11 million and they found a way to verify, just like Office of Economic Revitalization finds ways to verify whether or not businesses should qualify for their grants. Very similar. I see how you're saying that it could be difficult, but we had the same situation with businesses applying during COVID. Did they really get hurt during COVID, or did they not? Was their business already going down during COVID? And guess what? OER figured it out. They were able to give out grants to businesses that really needed it and were really hurt during COVID for something totally out of their control. So I have faith. I have faith that there's ways to find qualifications that can be verified. And I do believe that having a mechanism to distribute funds that were already discussed is what's fair to the public. So I do hope things can work out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. And exactly regarding that Los Angeles Business Interruption Board, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam and I, the transportation chair, were able to go to a conference in Phoenix, Arizona, where we saw numerous metropolitans, trial and error with their business interruption funds, with their different, not just rail or transportation lines, but also development lines, as growing cities themselves. So a lot of the time it did work out through their own county or city, like economic revitalization equivalent. But a lot of the times they had their own sort of like HCDA kind contracts or consultants that they had to help, like Councilmember Tupola said, usher that out, to usher out the grants. And a lot of the times it was maybe even just as little as 50,000 for like how many businesses. And it really depended on how much the city could put in first. But if we're looking for prescriptions and working it out, I think we have the contacts and ability to look to our partners in other metropolitans too. Any other? Okay, Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. Director, do we know about how many businesses this would apply to that would meet the criteria? You may not off the top of your head today, but just wonder if that's been a point of conversation.
I don't know if we have the database to determine that because, you know, if you look at the data we have, it relates to, you know, parcels, so size of parcel, you know, what's built on the parcel, classification, right, class and all of that. We don't factor in revenue. So we would have to find a source of revenue for businesses. And it has to be good information to determine, right, within a block of the corridor we're talking about, how many businesses apply, right? So there's two factors that we don't track in our systems: revenue size, revenue, and employment size, your number of employees. So that would have to be factored in, yeah. And then we have the rest, though, right? Because we have all the parcel information and so on with regard to businesses in the area that we're looking at. I would suggest, if we're going to go back and forth, with all due respect, Budget Chair, we can have more discussion outside of this meeting because, you know, if you want to talk about the Los Angeles fund that you just mentioned about 10 minutes ago, we can discuss that, and I'll do some research as well. But I think from you know, BFS's budget and fiscal services standpoint, we're not comfortable.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
As an administration.
Councilmember Dos Santos Tam.
I was still finished.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
I'll pass it over and then take
sorry
it
about
back.
that.
Yeah, so go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, Director. I guess my frustration is that, you know, we've heard from constituents, certainly since I got in a little over a year ago about this. We introduced this bill last year. We've been working on this. What would it take for your department or the administration in general to be comfortable with having some sort of program that provides these businesses with relief? I mean, I don't want to get into a point where we're discussing back and forth for the sake of discussion. I mean, what's the end goal here that gets you to a point of being comfortable?
Has something like this worked well in another municipality, you know, within another municipality, where there are measurables whereby everyone can say that, hey, it's something that we did that made a lot of sense, that was equitable, that's a program that the general taxpayer base can support. I know that it's impossible to get to close to 100% support, but because you never make everybody happy, right? There's people that are happy, those that are not, with regard to any legislation. But for the most part, are there examples in the US where this type of program has worked well? Because we're not in the pandemic anymore. You know, that's one thing. When we were in the pandemic a few years ago, we're out of it already. We're in the recovery phase. So even more so, is this the right thing to do? That's the hurdle I would have to get over. And I'm sure if I talk to my division chiefs, they're at the same place too, yeah.
Committee Vice Chair Wire.
I was just curious, so if the ordinance did, or the bill passed, I'm assuming the outreach would probably be designated to like OER or something like that?
More likely than not, yeah. They're much better suited to do outreach. Yes.
Okay, I appreciate that because just contemplating like what kind of staffing would need to be considered. And it sounds like fairly minimal because as you know, OER is coming off of some of the grant outreach. This could maybe fall into a similar job description.
Yeah, although this is not, the kind of grants they're doing is more along the lines of economic development, right? This type of situation is kind of, it's mitigation of harm. So it's a very different objective. So I think BFS would be working with OER with regard to the analysis that's done. Well, we have to set up administrative rules, right? So setting up rules and factoring in the kind of analysis that would have to be done. But definitely the outreach, the training, and all of that, should the program be put in place, I think OER is much better suited than BFS staff to do that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And then again, if it's fully, well, actually, I'll say clarified because this fund already exists. Is that your understanding?
The fund exists, but it's dormant, right? So it was funded, as council members have stated, in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. I've talked to staff who have been around, but nothing happened, right? So the money's lapsed, and so there's nothing in the fund right now. So it's we don't even report on it in the CAFR because there's no financial activity going into or out of the fund.
Okay, and I just asked because, again, if the bill passes and
I'm sorry, not CAFR, ACFR,
yeah,
Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, yeah.
No, thank you for clarifying. So, I mean, subject, of course, to funding being in the fund. So, I mean, if we come through the budget process, of course, mayor would propose an amount, if any, council would appropriate an amount, if any. Of course, given the economic climate at the time, it could be decided how much or how little is appropriate. Is that your understanding? Meaning that there's no obligation through passing this bill to throw a bunch of money in there.
Yeah, it's going to depend on where we are, right, as we balance the budget. And I don't know if it's this year. It could be something we look at next year if council decides to adopt this legislation.
Okay.
I think it'll be determined at the time.
Sorry, last question, Chair. So in terms of the rulemaking process, how long would that take if the bill, passes? What would that look like?
I don't know. And that's why I'd like to learn more about what other municipalities have done and, done a good job. Because anything, this legislation will create another layer of work we have to do. And again, if we have to go forward with it, we want to make sure that we can do a good job and do it right. And put a program in place that makes sense for the public as a whole, for the people of Oahu.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other discussion? No? Okay. I know that we talked about OER, and during our discussions and during multiple instances along DILICAM, of course, we come in, we either have our city council jackets or shirts. Of course, they sometimes relate, tie us into the OER outreach, business incentives outreach that has, touched Dillingham as well. So I know that along with the RURP, I think it's going to be closing up shop maybe in March or April. I think, we're not trying to, hopefully not tack on more onto OER, but seeing if there's a way we can continue certain outreach. Maybe I'm not saying to prescribe it to OER, but I'm saying there's already certain programs that's going to be sunsetting, and there could be discussions on how we can make it work through the possible staffing that may be available then as well. So I don't know if there's a way we can work that out, but this bill not only does it prescribe to assist us in ushering out this program this program for assistance for our small businesses especially, but it helps us work out the things that we're talking about, right? Like learning about the different municipalities and what they've done. So hopefully we can talk about that. Members, any other discussions? No? Any last words from Councilmember Dos Santos Tam? Okay. All right. With that, I have to go to testimony. I forgot. Okay. We don't have any registered online testifiers, but is there anyone online who wishes to testify? Please use the raise hand feature. Sorry, losing my voice. Or press *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone, and then I'll ask you to press *6 to unmute. Anyone online? *9 to raise hand. Okay, seeing none, we are moving to in-person testifiers. We have Andrew Min from Min Plastic and Supply.
Andrew Min Plastics. We're at the end of the Dillingham corridor, and over the past year, I've had the opportunity to personally facilitate a reduction of force by 25%. And I can see that it directly correlates to the construction as it moves closer. As it pertains to the items, from annual revenue, changing the definition over to a annual payroll, because I think that the money is going to the people of the companies. That's the first thing I look at eliminating or reducing, and including the criteria to a reduced benefit above a certain limit. So like a tiered benefits system for larger companies would be reduced. And in the end, directly benefit the people of the community and their livelihood. And second, on another 0.1 delta, I think, in Section 5, the primary or sole business access within the same city block versus just the city block, because there are dead ends, there's rerouting of traffic, and the road that we're on particularly does feed multiple businesses, and is very, very cumbersome. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Min. I really appreciate you for being here, and also for the last item too, spontaneously. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Okay, thank you, Mr. Min. Okay, members, we're back. Oh, is there anyone else in person who wishes to testify? Seeing none. Okay, members, we're back in discussion. Back in discussion before I lose my voice. Okay, so. Well, for discussion, of course, this is something that we've seen throughout, and of course, it felt a little disheartening to go through this process, but I was enlightened again when we went to this impact conference in Phoenix, Arizona, where through push and pull, through different municipalities, sought different ways to make it work. There are ways where we don't have to put like all of our millions of dollars, but even just like even $250,000, 50,000, or even a certain amount, and to put incentives in for our small businesses. There are different ways we can usher this, and having this bill to support the fund that already exists is something that we hope to work forward with the administration to see forward. And if it does work, or if it doesn't, once again, government shouldn't be ushering it out ourselves. Maybe we could work, like I said, with a third-party contract or consultant, as we did with our COVID funds. So that's what I have to say. I don't know if my co-sponsor of the legislation has anything to say.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate working with you on this because we share the Dillingham corridor, and again, we've seen how businesses have been negatively impacted. We know that this construction is going to go for years and eventually come into town and Kaka'ako, and we need some sort of framework here to get this done. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be wrapped up with a bow, but real businesses are suffering. I had the chance to meet with the owner of the Subway on Dillingham that just shut down. And, Subway, which is a franchisee backed up by all the marketing in the world from the Subway National, they couldn't cut it. I don't know how other businesses are going to make it for the next several years. And so I'm disappointed that the administration is taking the stance of not supporting this bill. As I asked, what else is there to support these businesses? What else can we do? And I don't want to take no for an answer. And so I think we ought to keep pushing forward on this because that's what these small business owners who've poured their heart and soul into their livelihoods, that's what they deserve.
Members, any discussion? Okay. With that, the chair recommends that Bill 40, 2023 be amended to the posted CD1 and as further as amended, as stated by Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos Tam. Any discussion? Any objections? Oh, my bad. Oh, excuse me. Okay, one moment. Let me restate my motion, yeah? Okay, the chair recommends that Bill 40, 2023 be amended to the posted CD1, which is OCS 2023-1083/12/14/2023 at 1:46 p.m. And as further amended and stated by Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos Tam. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Okay, the bill has been amended to the CD1. The chair then recommends that Bill 40, 2023, CD1 be reported out for passage on third reading. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Reservations by Councilmember Say? So ordered. Okay, there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.